Chapter 985. This is... Xing Hui was shocked when he saw the imperishable plate that the Master of Chaos had transformed into. Even though he had no idea that the imperishable plate was transformed from the Master of Chaos, the imperishable plate that was charging toward him with an oppressive aura was clearly hostile. Under such circumstances, Xing Hui did not hesitate to attack. He rapidly condensed a piece of starry sky with a diameter of 1 billion light-years. In less than 10 years, he compressed it into 100 high-energy starry skies with a diameter of 1 million light-years. As these starry skies were compressed by 10 times, their quality and energy response were greatly increased. Once they were projected out and hit their target, they would definitely blast a huge hole in an ordinary chaotic being. The imperishable plate that the Lord of Chaos had transformed into possessed the ability to evade attacks of this level, but for some reason, the imperishable plate faced the starry universes head-on without dodging. Instead, it brazenly met them head-on, and in the instant that the high-energy stars that contained 1 million light-years of mass were about to collide with its body, the imperishable plate was like a martial artist who had dominated the past and present, punching out and shattering the starry universes that were projected across the chaos. The speed and quality displayed in that instant made Xing Hui's heart skip a beat. He had thought that he could fight against the Master of Time and the Master of Gods, who were 6th-level chaotic beings. My guess is correct? This colossal being that is 10 trillion light-years long and similar to the imperishable plate is actually made of imperishable matter? Xing Hui was stunned by the scene before him. Imperishable matter had different values according to the power of time it contained. However, items that could be called imperishable matter contained at least 10,000 years of time power. Xing Hui had obtained the Burning Blood Lord's countless years of collection. If the power of time contained within the imperishable matter was divided into 10,000 years, the total amount would only be about 1 million light-years. 1 million light-years and 10 trillion light-years. How could the difference in time be just a little bit? How profound must its foundation be to possess so much imperishable matter? Xing Hui took a deep breath. No matter what realm this unknown creature was at, even if he was at the 5th level of the chaotic realm and the other party was only at the 4th level of the chaotic realm, the other party could still smash him to death by relying on the undying substance. It was like an aerial battle between a country with 10 4th-generation fighter jets and a country with 10,000 3rd-generation fighter jets. The other party's fighter jets might not be as advanced as yours, but they could easily overwhelm you with numbers. Furthermore, for a country that could produce tens of thousands of 3rd-generation fighter jets, it would be unreasonable to say that they did not develop 4th-generation fighter jets based on the 3rd-generation fighter jets. I can't afford to offend him. Xing Hui instantly determined the difference in strength between the two sides. He immediately changed his direction and tried to avoid this terrifying existence. But when he wanted to go around this terrifying being of unknown origin, the other party clearly did not want to let him go. At the same time he changed directions, the other party had already changed directions and attacked him. Moreover, he even mobilized the space-time power contained in the many undying substances on his body to accelerate time, causing the distance between the two of them, which originally still had 100 years to travel, to be constantly shortened at an extremely terrifying speed. This terrifying existence is coming for me? Xing Hui's expression changed. When did he offend such an expert? However, as the terrifying being drew closer to him, Xing Hui could clearly sense the intense pressure it exuded. After a brief analysis, he finally identified the terrifying being in front of him. The Master of Chaos. This life form that manifested the eternal plate is actually the Master of Chaos. This conclusion shocked Xing Hui. But soon he felt that it made sense. Needless to say, a peak life form that could manifest the eternal plate must be a Chaos Realm expert who had once invaded the Immortal Dao civilization and reaped great rewards. Back when the Immortal Dao civilization was conquered, the number of Chaos Realm experts who had invaded the Immortal Dao civilization was probably close to 3 digits. But those who had truly reaped great rewards were only the Master of Gods, the Master of Time, the Master of Chaos, and a few others. And among these great existences, the Master of Chaos was the one with the greatest foundation. This ancient life form that had lived for countless years would usually fight against others. Even against 6th-level primal chaos realm life forms, it only needed to choose the infinite division technique. It could easily exhaust the other party to death. Even if it obtained the undying substance, it could still survive. After accumulating for so long, it was reasonable for him to have accumulated so much undying matter. The only thing that shocked him was that the Lord of Chaos had actually left his true body and formed a true body of an evil god, just like the one Lord of Searing Blood had used to invade the Lord of Chaos Chaosverse. Once the Lord of Chaos was separated from his own Chaosverse, the Lord of Chaos Chaosverse would be greatly weakened. Not only would his Chaosverse be invaded by others, but the Lord of Chaos himself would also lose his immortal life force. Once he encountered a powerful enemy that could trap and kill his avatar of the Wheel of Eternity, the only thing waiting for him would be true death. It seems that the Master of Chaos is truly enraged by my previous actions. Xing Hui smiled wryly. Faced with the eternal plate that was completely constructed from undying substances, Xing Hui could only do his best to avoid and evade its attacks. At the same time, he began to disregard the limits of his ability to split his body. This way, he could at least slightly increase his resistance to attacks. No matter what, there was a limit to the power contained in the immortal disc that the Lord of Chaos had transformed into. Once the power in this incarnation was exhausted, he would naturally have to give up. The next battle would be nothing more than who could last until the end. He did not believe that he, who had the characteristics of a chaotic life form and a creation life form, could not even defeat the avatar of the Master of Chaos. In fact, when the battle really broke out, Xing Hui realized that he might not be able to defeat it. The Eternal Plate, which was completely constructed from undying substances, had astonishing combat power. Moreover, because it had the ability to control time, it could directly return his body to the time before it split. In other words, as long as the Eternal Plate's attack hit, it could basically cause Xing Hui's body to lose at least 1 trillion light-years. This was under the condition that Xing Hui did his best to dodge or even block the attack. If he was hit directly by the Eternal Plate's attack, it would not be strange for a hole of 3 trillion or even 4 trillion light-years to appear on his body. Even if Xing Hui's body had become immeasurably large, it would still not be easy to split and repair such a huge damage. I have to get close to the void where the immortal civilization is as soon as possible to sense the avatar. Then, I'll use it to transmit the avatar in the river of time to them for analysis. From there, I'll know the trajectory of the Eternal Plate that the Master of Chaos has transformed into, and I'll be able to avoid it. Only then will I be able to contend with the Eternal Plate of the Master of Chaos. Otherwise, the speed of destruction will exceed the speed of splitting. In less than 30,000 years, my chaotic universe will definitely be destroyed by the Eternal Plate. When he thought of this, Xing Hui immediately stopped fighting the Eternal Plate of the Master of Chaos avatar and charged toward the immortal civilization with all his might. With the infinite splitting of a chaos life form and the speed of a creation life form, he was still slower than the Eternal Plate even at full speed. However, the Eternal Plate would attack him from time to time, so it naturally slowed down the pursuit. Under such circumstances, it wouldn't be difficult for him to hold on for 20 or 30,000 years. When he got close to the void where the immortal civilization's broken world was and sensed the avatar with the Lord of Myriad Treasures and the others, he would be able to rely on the River of Time's foresight to contend with it. Even if the Eternal Plate of the Master of Chaos avatar could also draw on his own chaotic universe to replenish its strength, he would still be able to rely on the River of Time's foresight to contend with it to his heart's content. When that time came, neither side would be able to do anything to the other, and that would be the time for true peace talks. The two peak existences chased each other through the void of chaos for over 10,000 years. In 2 years, Xing Hui was getting closer and closer to the immortal civilization. He could even vaguely sense his avatar, but at this moment, several peak chaos and creation life forms blocked his path. These peak existences were none other than the Master of Gods, the Master of Creation, and the others who had followed the Eternal Plate of the Master of Chaos here. Worried that the Master of Chaos would use a diversion tactic, the Master of Gods, the the master of time, and the others didn't move quickly even though they'd chased after him. This was especially so as they got further and further away from the immortal civilization, which made them even more hesitant. As a result, they fell behind the eternal plate by an extremely long distance. Now that Xing Hui had returned to the immortal civilization, he ran into the Master of Gods, the Master of Time, and the others who'd chased after him. When they saw Qing Su constantly being hunted down by the imperishable disk that the Lord of Chaos had transformed into, the Master of Gods, the Time King, and so on, were slightly stunned at first. Afterwards, they immediately understood all the clues that had led to the situation. It's this chaos life form, this new chaos life form that contains the opportunity of eternity. It's in his hands. It's because of that treasure that this chaos life form was able to ascend to this level in such a short time, even obtaining the immortal civilization's legacy and ascending to the 5th level of chaos realm in such a short time. His life essence is a chaos life form, isn't it? But his movement speed isn't any slower than a creation life form's, and he possesses the characteristics of both chaos life forms and creation life forms? Even if it's not because of the mysteries of eternity, just the fact that he can possess the strengths of both life forms at the same time is worth studying. He's an arrow at the end of its flight. This is the perfect opportunity to take him down. The Master of Time and the Master of Gods didn't hesitate to strike at this thought. They weren't the only ones. The other chaos life forms and creation life forms weren't willing to fall behind in the face of such an opportunity. Whoever captures him first will be the first to grasp the mysteries of eternity. The power of the imperishable plate, which the Master of Chaos has transformed into, has been greatly weakened. In addition, his original body is still far away from here. With his speed, it will take him at least 100,000 years to travel. Without this most terrifying existence, no one can stop me. So this chaos life form is the key to all of this. For a moment, all the beings of chaos and creation attacked Qing Su at the same time. If the Heavenly Lord of Myriad Treasures and the others were here right now, they would definitely be able to link this scene to the image the Heavenly Lord of Myriad Treasures had sent to Qing Su from the River of Time when he was still a great master of the Azure Duckweed Sword Spirit. Chapter 986. This scene. Xing Hui felt as though a bolt of lightning had struck his mind as he looked at the numerous figures surging toward him from all directions. The image that the Qingping Sword Spirit had given him through the River of Time. It was a scene of him facing off against countless chaos and creation life forms alone, like a pack of heroes vying for supremacy. Amidst the encirclement of dozens of chaos and creation beings, including the Master of Gods, the Master of Time, and the Master of Chaos, the most important target was himself. Xing Hui. Is this the fate that the Qingping Sword Spirit predicted from the River of Time? Xing Hui wondered, but he didn't feel too alarmed. It seemed to be because he'd already seen the scene in front of him from that image. So, what happened in the end? I was surrounded by these creation life forms and chaos life forms and completely torn apart. But what about that circle of light? The circle of light in the image flashed through Xing Hui's mind. A circle of flowing light surrounded him. The only thing missing from the image was that circle of light. The next moment, Xing Hui seemed to think of something, and his gaze fell on the almost complete River of Time in his chaotic universe. The River of Time, specks of starlight. The radiance it emitted was exactly the same as the one he'd seen in the image back then. The River of Time. Xing Hui's gaze froze on the River of Time in his chaotic universe. He suddenly understood. Whether it was the Master of Time, the Master of Chaos, or even the Master of Gods, what was the ultimate goal of all chaos and creation life forms? Eternity. It represented the end of the path of cultivation, the limit of all life. When Xing Hui first saw the image in the River of Time, he'd heard the Lord of Myriad Treasures say that compared to other chaotic universes and creation universes, the greatest characteristic of the immortal Tao civilization was none other than the River of Time. The River of Time was an eternal footprint. The almighty plate of the progenitor, the plate of eternity, had used the world of immortal Tao civilization as its foundation to forge its own path of eternity. The footsteps it had left behind had formed the river of time, a path that led to the ultimate, to eternity. As long as anyone followed his footsteps and walked forward step by step, there would be hope for them to see through the mysteries of eternity, step into the final destination, and advance to the ultimate eternity. Ultimate eternity. The river of time, the eternal path that belonged to the great ancient plate and the eternal plate, wasn't a one-time thing. It wasn't as if someone would disappear forever just because they walked into it. Instead, as long as the immortal Tao civilization was not destroyed, it would exist for all eternity. It would point out the path to eternity for all living beings in the immortal Tao civilization, for all sentient beings who pursued the ultimate eternity. Sing Hui suddenly thought of the immortal Tao civilization created by the progenitor's plate. When he'd attained eternity, he'd traced back to himself and turned his body from before eternity into a vast and boundless primordial world, giving birth to a flourishing and resplendent civilization of the immortal Tao. What a grand and noble sentiment this was! How could a being with such grand sentiments sit idly by and watch as the multitude of beings he'd nurtured was annihilated, vanquished by the invasion of creation and chaos beings from the outside world? He'd clearly left behind his own path and walked down it 9,999 times. Anyone who followed his footsteps and took that final step would be able to come into contact with the ultimate mysteries, achieve eternity. There was only one way for the river of time to truly manifest itself. A saint had to ignite himself, step into the river of time with his own flames and heart of sacrifice, and illuminate the 9,999 steps on the path. However, because of the fear of the immortal Tao civilization, because of their short-sightedness, because of the saints' confidence in the immortal Tao civilization, because of the arrogance of the creation and chaos lifeforms, and because of the possessiveness of the chaos lifeforms and creation lifeforms, the immortal Tao civilization was shattered. The river of time dissipated with the destruction of the immortal Tao civilization. No one could see through the path of eternity left behind by the almighty plate of eternity. In the long years that followed, the immortal Tao civilization paid the price for their short-sightedness, fear, and selfishness. The immortal Tao civilization was on the brink of extinction. On the other hand, the creations and chaos beings who had invaded the immortal Tao civilization gained nothing from their impulsiveness and recklessness. Instead, they schemed against each other and fought incessantly as they searched for the secrets of eternity. There were no winners in this war. A heart of sacrifice, Sing Hui murmured to himself. He vaguely understood that manifesting the river of time didn't require a heart of sacrifice. Instead, the determination to step into ultimate eternity. The almighty plate of eternity had already taken the 9,999 steps for the immortal Tao civilization. All they needed to do now was to grow, muster the courage, and take another step forward. Everything would fall into place. In fact, he even had another consideration. If the cultivators of the immortal Tao civilization didn't have the ability to take that final step, they could choose to open up the immortal Tao civilization and invite the countless peak 6th level chaos beings of the primal chaos void into the immortal Tao civilization. They could discuss the Tao with them, absorb their experiences, verify each other, and ascend step by step to the peak of the primal chaos. After all, the river of time would only appear when the saints of the immortal Tao civilization sacrificed themselves to reach the ultimate eternity. For the sake of peeking into the mysteries of eternity, those peak 6th level chaos realm cultivators wouldn't be stingy with their experiences, techniques, and secret arts. To them, eternity was greater than anything else. For eternity, they could give up everything. Unfortunately, a trump card had ultimately fallen to such a state. The apex beings of the immortal Tao civilization who stood at the very peak of the world didn't think of advancing. They were trapped in one place, and they were highly oppressive to their own people, causing all sorts of resistance. An accident had exposed the immortal Tao civilization. After that, the apex beings of the immortal Tao civilization had boundless confidence in the immortal Tao civilization. They had thought that the immortal Tao civilization's foundation was enough to deal with any threat. But they hadn't expected that the plate of the primogenitor, which had opened up the immortal Tao civilization, had only ascended to ultimate eternity. In other words, he hadn't reached eternity at that time. He had only been peak 6th level chaos realm. In the end, the master of primal chaos had arrived. His infinitely divided mass crushed the immortal Tao civilization, causing it to fall into an unprecedented calamity. Sigh, Tsinghui sighed. The river of time before Tsinghui's eyes was only an illusory image. He could see the river of time and receive strands of information from it. He could then analyze the information to form images of the future, but he couldn't touch it. He couldn't touch it. This was because only a saint of the immortal Tao civilization could truly materialize it. Due to the uniqueness of the river of time, only a saint of the immortal Tao civilization who had reached the peak and was about to break through to eternity would burn all of his strength. With the courage, perseverance, and determination to succeed or die trying, he would pull the river of time out of the illusory trajectory of time and step into it. He would follow the great plate of the primogenitor and the plate of eternity to advance step by step and break through to eternity. But now, his cultivation was clearly still a little short of breaking through to the eternal realm. He understood this point. But if he wanted to rely on this to convince the creations and chaos beings who were eyeing him covetously, especially the furious Lord of Chaos, there was no hope at all. To all creations and chaos beings, which one of them didn't have loftiness higher than the heavens? They believed that only the things in their hands could truly be considered useful and belong to them. Even the path of eternity was no exception. No one understood the greatness of the plate of the primogenitor. No one understood the selflessness of the plate of eternity. Sentient beings, the moment they obtained the power to rule over others, their hearts were filled with endless desires. Under the urging of their desires, they constantly wanted to obtain more power. They constantly wanted to rule over the lives and deaths of even more people. They constantly wanted to spread their might across the myriad worlds and watch the billions of people tremble before them. They enjoyed the incomparable feeling of being a sovereign, supreme existence. Tsinghui thought back carefully. Wasn't that the case? The entire world, the entire chaotic void, all the chaotic universes and creation universes had fallen ill and gone mad. If the entire chaotic void and the countless chaotic universes and creation universes were counted as the many organs of a human, then this person could be said to have long been devoid of morals and sinful to the extreme. There was no room for light, justice, or magnanimity in his heart. Where there's a cause, there's an effect. All of this is the result of the omnipresent malice. Tsinghui suddenly thought of a phrase from the immortal Tao civilization. The eternity and infinity calamity is an eternity and infinity calamity that pervades the entire chaotic void. Moreover, this eternity and infinity calamity has long since begun. It will only truly end when all living beings in the chaotic void, including those in the chaos and creation universes, have met its end. In fact, the eternity and infinity calamity's influence is so vast that it spans the entire timeline. Even the supreme eternals who can trace back to the origin of the timeline may not be able to stop the eternity and infinity calamity from erupting. Just like the great plate of the progenitor and the plate of eternity, they couldn't solve the problem at its root, so they only left behind the path of eternity in hopes of stopping the eternity and infinity calamity from erupting. Unfortunately, people hadn't grasped onto that hope. There's always a price to pay for everything. I've killed countless people in my life, and I don't know how many innocent souls I've killed. Now, it's time for me to pay the price. This was the general trend. The general trend of the eternity and infinity calamity. A trend that even the great plate of the progenitor and the plate of eternity couldn't stop. The only thing they could do was to follow the general trend and send themselves and all of these living beings into the immeasurable eternity tribulation. His chaotic universe began to burn and dazzling light blossomed from his body. This scene thoroughly verified the image that the Qingping sword spirit had transmitted to him from the river of time. Chapter 987. Well then, let's break through to the eternal realm together. Let's see who can succeed and achieve the ultimate goal. As Tsinghui spoke, the light around him gradually dissipated and grew brighter. Waves of profound eternal aura emanated from it. What's this? The Lord of Gods, Lord of Time, Lord of Chaos, and many other creation and chaos beings couldn't help but widen their eyes when they sensed the eternal aura emanating from Tsing Hui's eternal aura. The aura of eternal aura spread out, reaching hundreds of millions of light years across the chaos. It didn't seem to be affected by time or space. Even the chaos and creation beings far away in the immortal Tao civilization could sense it clearly, and all of them looked up in the direction of the eternal aura. Eternal. This is the eternal aura. It transcends time and space. This is true eternal. The mysteries of eternal. After sensing the presence of eternity, the chaos beings and creation beings who had been worried that the Lord of Chaos and the others had left as a diversion, or that the ultimate treasure that contained the mysteries of eternity might still be hidden in the immortal Tao civilization, went mad at once. All of them charged at full speed in the direction of the presence of eternity, with some chaos beings even wishing they could be like the Lord of Chaos, temporarily abandoning their massive bodies and rushing at full speed to the location of the presence of eternity. Perhaps due to the eternal aura's spread, the clone he'd left in the jade dragon soars above the heavens suddenly became clear. After tens of thousands of years, the clone had developed some self-awareness and was faintly transforming into another person. Fortunately, when Tsing Hui's own consciousness descended, the two consciousnesses instantly merged. Sensing his clone at this critical moment, Tsing Hui didn't dare delay and hurried toward the Lord of Myriad Treasures as quickly as he could. Since the Lord of Time, Lord of Chaos, and Lord of Gods, all great existences who loved to stir up trouble, had left this domain, it had been extremely peaceful for the past tens of thousands of years. With enough time, the Lord of Myriad Treasures led the Immortal Emperors, Immortal Lords, and Fusang Immortal Emperor to study the various information they'd seen in the River of Time. Lord of Myriad Treasures. Tsing Hui's voice echoed. Upon seeing Tsing Hui's arrival and the familiar spirituality in Tsing Hui's incarnation's eyes, the Heavenly Lord of Myriad Treasures was pleasantly surprised. You're finally back? Help me check the progress of my timeline right now. Tsing Hui didn't have time to greet him and asked immediately. We're looking at it. In the past tens of thousands of years, we've never slacked off in our research, but it's very strange. How do I pass this strange method? Sage, come and take a look for yourself. As the Heavenly Lord of Myriad Treasures said that, he directly brought Qing Su to the deepest part of the research institute. He did not even bother to greet the other immortal emperors and immortal dukes. He directly passed a piece of information to Qing Su. These are the images of other times we've studied in the past few years. No matter which piece of information we start with, for some reason, the final images all point to one. Tsing Hui glanced at the image and immediately realized it was the image that was said to have come from the Qingping sword spirit a long time ago before he became a chaos life form. It was also the scene he was facing now. All the images point to this scene? It seems that this scene is the end of all the information you've given us about the River of Time. The end, Tsing Hui muttered to himself. After tens of thousands of years of accumulation, Tsing Hui's horizons were far greater than before. He even had a certain understanding of the legendary eternity. All the images in the River of Time were condensed into one. There were only two possibilities. One possibility was that his life had already ended at that moment. No matter which timeline it was, at this point, only death awaited him. Since the information had been extracted from the River of Time with him as the coordinate, his life had stopped, and the River of Time that belonged to him naturally flowed to the end. There was another possibility, and that was eternity. He had achieved the ultimate, restraining all his timelines and becoming one with himself. He had transcended space and time, and from then on, the River of Time naturally wouldn't leave any traces of him. However, the second possibility, was it possible? One had to know that he hadn't even reached the 6th level of the Chaos Realm. In fact, he had just advanced to the 5th level. How could he reach the Eternity Realm in one step? What happened? The Heavenly Lord of Myriad Treasures asked worriedly. It's nothing. I'll think of a way to solve it. Qing Su said. In the end, he glanced at the Lord of Chaos' colossal body. At that moment, the original body of the Master of Chaos had already left this incalculably huge body. However, just like how the Burning Blood Lord still had a trace of consciousness after leaving his own universe, his chaotic universe was still operating. However, his control over the living beings in the universe had declined again. However, this decline was nothing to the living beings in the Master of Chaos's chaotic universe because the Master of Chaos had always adopted a policy of allowing the living beings in the chaotic universe to grow freely. Whether the Master of Chaos's consciousness existed in the chaotic universe or not, probably no one knew except for a few top existences like the Black and White Supremes. I plan to make a trip to the territory of the Master of Chaos. Currently, the Master of Chaos's enormous body has moved more than once. Can that teleportation portal still be used? Can. The Lord of Myriad Treasures nodded. Although the Master of Chaos has moved his body during this time, our immortal Tao civilization has always been known for the strength of our formations. After a period of research, we've adjusted the portal properly and can use it to travel to the divine wilderness great world at any time. All right. Sing Hui nodded. He didn't have much time left. Even if the time axis of chaos beings was longer, it would take at most 10 years for the Time Lord, Chaos Lord, Lord of Gods, and many other chaos beings and creation beings to arrive and launch an attack. At that time, he would have to abandon everything and manifest the River of Time, dragging them into the River of Time and advancing towards eternity together. He had to hurry. Fortunately, his replica had become incomparably powerful after years of cultivation and refinement. It was even more powerful than the Sovereign Battle replica from before. Not to mention the Black and White Supremes, the City Lord of Colossal Dragon City, and the Grand Expansion Holy Sovereign, it wouldn't even pale in comparison to the likes of the Qilin Progenitor. Under the Lord of Myriad Treasures' guidance, he quickly arrived at the teleportation portal in the origin world. Sing Hui sighed inwardly as he looked at the mountains and rivers that were vastly different from the Eastern Sun Sword sect of yesteryear. He recalled the scene of him fighting to the death in the ancestral land of the Eastern Sun Sword sect, and it felt like it was just yesterday. Unfortunately, time was gone, and the past was forever in the past. Saint, your senior sister, Fairy Jiang, has cultivated to the level of a great immortal with the resources you left behind. She's broken away from Sword Mountain Villa and established a new faction called the Eastern Sun Sword Sect. Would you like to go take a look? The Lord of Myriad Treasures inquired. Sing Hui glanced at the area where the people from the origin world had settled down. After a moment of silence, he said, "The Eastern Sun Sword Sect. Speaking of which, this is my real sect. However, looking at the time, let's wait a little longer. When I return from the Divine Wilderness Great World, I'll spend the rest of my time in the Jade Dragon soaring through the heavens and won't go out again." The Lord of Myriad Treasures nodded. Immediately, an immortal overseeing the teleportation portal opened for Tsing Hui and respectfully sent Tsing Hui into the portal. As the teleportation portal rippled, Tsing Hui soon appeared on the Fortune mainland of the Divine Wilderness Great World. I haven't returned to the Divine Wilderness Great World for tens of thousands of years, Tsing Hui muttered to himself. Greetings, Saint. At this moment, one of the immortal emperors on the other side of the teleportation formation sensed Qing Su's arrival and immediately bowed towards him in a rather fanatical manner. Tsing Hui nodded to the immortal emperor and was about to step forward. However, a moment later, he seemed to have thought of something and asked, I haven't returned to the Divine Wilderness Great World for a long time. In these years, has there been any changes in the Divine Wilderness Great World? Reporting to Saint, the Divine Wilderness Great World. If there are changes, there are two main reasons. However, strictly speaking, there is only one reason, and that is that the production of Tao carriers here has decreased. Currently, the annual production has decreased from tens of thousands to less than 100, a drop of 100 times. Due to the decrease in the production of Tao carriers, the Divine Wilderness Great World, which was in the midst of vigorous development, has declined. Even though the Divine Wilderness Great World is the birthplace of the famous Primordial Chaos Empire in the universe, it is still no longer as prosperous as it used to be. Other than a few elders of the primordial chaos empire, the strongest experts are only a few supremes. The production of Tao carriers in the divine wilderness great world has decreased. Xing Hui now understood what the so-called Tao aura was. In fact, it was the information of many laws of the immortal Tao civilization. Back then, when the fortune jade fragment was left in the divine wilderness great world, under the diffraction of information, the production of Tao aura in the divine wilderness great world was naturally extremely shocking. However, after Xing Hui took the fortune jade away, the mysterious influence of this supreme treasure naturally caused the production of Tao aura in the divine wilderness great world to rapidly decline in the following tens of thousands of years. How many elders of the primordial chaos empire do you think there are in the divine wilderness great world? There are 3 groups of elders. You probably don't know 2 of them, but you should still remember the oldest group of saints. They are the elder of the primordial chaos sword sect, Master Hidden Truth, and the sect master of the Hidden Sword sect, Sword Venerable Hidden Sword. Oh, now Master Hidden Truth should be called Master Hidden Truth, but Sword Venerable Hidden Sword is already worthy of his name. Master Hidden Truth, Sword Venerable Hidden Sword. The 2 of them have already reached the Supremes. This speed, with the help of Xing Hui's resources, wasn't slow, but it wasn't fast either. As Xing Hui's divine sense swept out, he quickly sensed Master Hidden Truth's location at the old site of the primordial chaos sword sect, which was also the old site of the heavenly Tao. However, when his divine sense swept across the fortune mainland, he didn't sense Rock Core's aura. He didn't know if Rock Core had died of old age or had gone to a place outside the divine wilderness great world. I'll continue to trouble you with the transmission array. Please rest assured, Sage. Ching Su nodded. He took a step forward, and the space rapidly shrank under his feet. When his foot landed, he had already appeared in the courtyard of the Zhangzhen monk of the Hunyuan sword sect. Chapter 988. Song Zhen the Exalted was currently flipping through an ancient book. Nobody knew what kind of information was recorded in it, but he was reading it with great interest. After noticing that there was one more person in the courtyard, he was slightly startled at first. Then, the aura of a supreme master was about to erupt from his body. However, before he could show off his might as a supreme expert, Ching Su spoke first. Exalted One, it's been a long time. I trust you've been well. Xing Hui, it's you? Song Zhen the Exalted looked at Xing Hui and was pleasantly surprised. You're back? It's been tens of thousands of years. I asked those people in the immortal Tao civilization, and they all said that you went into seclusion to condense those nomological fragments, which would take a very long time. I didn't expect you to take so long. You went into seclusion for more than 60,000 years. You're really good. Xing Hui smiled. I didn't want to, but it's really not easy to refine the nomological fragments. Moreover, the further I go, the more time I need. I can't relax at all. Of course, he would not tell Song Zhen the Exalted Master that he was actually fighting a battle of wits and courage with the likes of the Master of Chaos and the Master of Time to escape their pursuit. The difference between the two was too big. If he told Song Zhen the Exalted Master, it would just make him worry for no reason. I can understand that. Besides, I've heard from others that you're now a famous great medium. Moreover, you're the top existence among all the great medium. It's said that you're even on the Supreme Divine list, right? At your level, if you want to improve your cultivation, you'll need to spend a long time cultivating and settling down. Even if it's me, if I have an epiphany now, it'll probably take me hundreds or thousands of years to cultivate in seclusion. Song Zhen the Exalted Master understood very well. Did you come back this time because your cultivation has temporarily come to an end? Not really. It's just that I've temporarily reached a bottleneck, so I stopped cultivating and came out for a walk. Bottleneck? Zhangzhen Exalted Master nodded and said, the higher the cultivation, the harder it is to break through the bottleneck. It is indeed a good choice to come out and have a walk at this time. Unfortunately, we old guys have been left far behind by you. Let alone teaching you like before, we probably can't even understand what you are saying to us. the strongest, you have far surpassed us old guys. This is all thanks to Venerable Master for laying a good foundation for me when I first started cultivating. Tsing Hui said with a smile. Master Tsongzhen's attitude didn't change because of the change in his cultivation level. This feeling was very good. At this moment, a series of footsteps came from outside the courtyard. Soon after, a woman with a cultivation of the unhindered realm walked in from outside. Accompanying her were 2 men and 2 women who were about the same age as her. These people were also in the unhindered realm. Great-grandfather, we're here to see you. When the woman arrived at the courtyard, she immediately ran over with a smile. Great-grandfather, you have a guest? Who is it? I don't think I've seen him in the past few decades. It's little Zhen. Master Tsongzhen looked at the girl, his eyes full of doting for the younger generation. You can't be disrespectful in front of this lord. It's okay, just be casual. Tsing Hui looked at the girl and said, Venerable Master, this little girl has your bloodline. When Master Tsongzhen heard this, his face couldn't help but turn red. Later on, I became Dao companions with Sister Li, and we had a son and a daughter. The 2 of them didn't disappoint and had many children. Qizhen is my great-granddaughter. You have a lot of children and grandchildren. Venerable Master, now you can enjoy the joy of family. Tsing Hui said with a smile. Isn't that so? Master Tsongzhen also smiled very happily. Compared to that little brat and the other juniors, little Zhen often comes to see me. I like her personality very much. Qing Su nodded. His gaze landed on the girl called Qizhen. Come to think of it, I'm her senior as well. How can I not give her a greeting gift? As he spoke, he made a grasping motion, and an aura containing a mysterious law condensed in his hand. This is... Master Tsongzhen didn't react to this massive law energy, but the 4 youths behind him who were of the same generation as Qizhen couldn't help but shout, The originator! The originator! This is the originator! Heavens, it's a supreme treasure like the originator. With such a supreme treasure, one's chances of ascending to the supreme realm in the future will be dozens of times higher than others. Obtaining this is almost equivalent to taking half a step into the supreme realm. It's actually such a treasure. Tsing Hui casually condensed a portion of the originator and handed it to Qizhen. Consider this my greeting gift to you. Qizhen also recognized the item in front of her. She understood how precious a portion of the originator was and immediately shook her head in a fluster. No, this gift is too precious. I can't accept it. On the other hand, Master Tsongzhen was very straightforward. Since it's a gift from Tsing Hui, you should accept it. I believe this item is nothing to Tsing Hui. Tsing Hui nodded. A originator was, in fact, a subdued law energy. Its value was much lower than a law fragment. Ordinary great masters would need a lot of time to subdue a portion of law energy and condense it into an originator. However, for someone like him who had reached the 5th level of the Chaos Realm, tearing apart a law fragment was nothing difficult, let alone condensing a mere originator. If he wanted, it wouldn't be difficult for him to condense dozens or even hundreds of grand originals in a day. Accept it. Tsing Hui said and directly sent the originator into Qizhen's body. Thank you. Even Qizhen, who originally had a rather lively personality, was frightened by the grand origin supreme treasure that Qing Su had casually taken out. At this time, a young girl behind Qizhen seemed to have thought of something and couldn't help but widen her eyes. Tsing Hui, our Hunyuan Sword Sect's Grand Elder, the great emperor of the Hunyuan Empire, His Majesty the Hunyuan Sword Emperor, his real name, seems to be Tsing Hui. From what I know, when His Majesty Tsongzhen was young, he was on very good terms with the great Hunyuan Sword Emperor. Could it be? As soon as she said this, the remaining 3 people were immediately stifled. Not only them, but even Qizhen's mouth was agape. She stared at Tsing Hui and stuttered, Lord, you are the Grand Elder of our Hunyuan Sword Sect, the great Emperor of the Empire, the great Hunyuan Sword Emperor? Tsing Hui smiled and just nodded. On the other hand, Zongzhen Exalted didn't think so much and said directly, to be able to condense a supreme treasure like the originator, Even ordinary great masters can't do that. Who else could it be other than the only great elder of our Hunyuan sword sect? When Qi Zhen and the others heard Song Zhen Exalted's words, they immediately looked at Xing Hui as if they were looking at a god. After they reacted, they quickly bowed and saluted, "Greetings, His Majesty the Hunyuan Sword Emperor." Xing Hui nodded and then said to Song Zhen Exalted, "Master Tianxiong, Master Zhu Zhao, and the others should be at the Hunyuan sword sect. I plan to go there. Do you want to come with me?" Song Zhen Exalted was a little tempted, but after a while he waved his hand and said, "My personality has become lazy. I won't accompany you to run around. You go alone. Then I'll take my leave. Take care. After becoming a supreme being, my lifespan will be endless. With you, an expert on the Supreme Divine List, as my backer, who would be so blind as to have ideas about me. You just need to be careful. Don't work too hard on your cultivation. You're strong enough now." "I'll be careful." Xing Hui nodded slightly, then stepped on the void and disappeared without a trace. After Xing Hui left, Qi Zhen, who was suppressed by Xing Hui's identity and almost didn't dare to move, jumped up and said, "His Majesty the Hunyuan Sword Emperor, His Majesty the Hunyuan Sword Emperor, it's the great Hunyuan Sword Emperor. I actually saw His Majesty the Hunyuan Sword Emperor in person. It's incredible." The remaining 4 people were also excited and couldn't control themselves. They didn't have the demeanor of a traversal realm expert at all. After all, to the people of the Hunyuan sword sect and the Hunyuan Empire, Xing Hui was a living legend. They couldn't worship him enough. When Master Song Zhen saw this, he chuckled and said in a boastful tone, "What's the primordial sword emperor that you're talking about? Come, little guys, sit here. I'm not afraid to tell you that back then, Song Zhen almost became his master." While Song Zhen Exalted bragged about his great achievements to these juniors, Xing Hui flashed and appeared in the Hidden Sword Sect. At this time, the Hidden Sword Sect had already been merged into the Hunyuan Sword Sect. Only the Hidden Sword Venerable was left to guard the Hidden Sword Continent. It was like an old man who was used to the storms of the outside world and returned to his hometown to retire. Qing Su obviously respected the Hidden Sword Venerable quite a lot. In the past, if it were not for the Hidden Sword Venerable who had taught him the extreme way of the sword and provided him with the resources to reach the Golden Core realm, he probably would have had to spend a very long time to reach even greater heights. As a matter of fact, he might have even died from the vengeance of the sword fragment afterwards. As a result, even though he had become a true creature of chaos now and could stand up to great existences like the Lord of Chaos, the Lord of Gods, and the Lord of Time, he still respected this old man. After chatting with the Hidden Sword Venerable for a day and sighing with emotion, Xing Hui didn't stay for long and set off again. This time, his target was the Hunyuan Sword Sect and the Hunyuan Empire where the Hunyuan Sword Sect was located. It had been more than 60,000 years since the establishment of the Primordial Empire. However, as the Supreme Emperor, he had yet to truly see his own country. Taking advantage of the time he still had, he planned to spend a few years in the vast territory he had conquered to properly explore and appreciate these great rivers and mountains. If he didn't take a closer look, he probably wouldn't have the chance in the future. Chapter 989. The Hunyuan Empire. It was a country derived from the name of the Hunyuan sword sect. Aside from the imperial family, the greatest power in the Hunyuan Empire was naturally the Hunyuan sword sect. Of these 2 powers, the one with supreme status was naturally Qing Su, the retired emperor, and the Grand Elder. However, because he had not appeared in the Hunyuan Empire for over 60,000 years, even though he was rumored to be a mythical figure, the ones who truly commanded reverence were the sect master of the Hunyuan sword sect and the current emperor of the empire. The one in charge of the Hunyuan sword sect was the former leader of the Firmament sword sect, Firmament Master. However, the emperor of the Hunyuan Empire was someone Xing Hui had never heard of. Zhuo Xiaolong. However, from his surname, one could guess that he was a descendant of someone from the Zhuo family. When Xing Hui arrived at the Hunyuan Empire, he did not announce this to everyone. Instead, he walked around the Hunyuan Empire and experienced the local customs of the Hunyuan Empire. In general, the Hunyuan Empire had inherited the territory of Great Emperor Qishao. In addition to a series of transactions with Emperor Bai, the empire's territory was so vast that it could be said to be one of the best in the Master of Chaos territory. In addition, although Tsinghui had not been active in the outside world for tens of thousands of years, his deterrence of killing Great Emperor Qishao and the eight-armed dragon god was still there. For the top great divines, 60,000 years was really nothing. After the Taiyan Holy Master obtained a large number of law fragments in the battle against the Qilin ancestor, he had also been in seclusion for 30,000 years. Under such circumstances, with the deterrence of the reputation of an expert on the Supreme Divine List, the Hunyuan Empire's development could be said to be thriving. There were countless experts born in the empire. Of course, the top group were Gu Xuanzuan, Heavenly Master Dragon Sword, Lord of Dao Qingshui, and others who had received Tsing Hui's kindness and took the initiative to show goodwill to Tsing Hui. The rest were the Sword Masters of the Void Sword Pavilion and Firmament Master and Zhu Zhao Master, who had already broken through to the Dominator level. These two masters could be considered as Dominator-level experts born and raised in the Hunyuan Sword sect. Apart from these two, there was only one other extremely talented cultivator in the Hunyuan Sword sect, and that was naturally Bai Shuaing, Bai Heng's Sword Master. Compared to Guru Firmament and Guru Zhu Zhao, who were still in the Sovereign Realm, Bai Shuaing had broken through to the Sovereign Realm 60,000 years ago, which was not long after Tsing Hui had escaped from the Primal Chaos Lord's suppression. She had been in the Sovereign Realm for 60,000 years, and she had broken through 2,000 years ago, transforming her body into the Tao and becoming a powerful being. Tsing Hui didn't know whether to sigh or sigh at this result. Based on his understanding of the cultivation system of the Lord of Chaos, once she chose to transform her body into Tao, she would lose all hope of becoming a Chaos life form or a Creation life form. Unless the Lord of Chaos perished one day, becoming a great medium would be the limit she could reach in her life. After listening to this news for 3 years, Tsing Hui had to temporarily put aside the idea of continuing to tour the Hunyuan Empire. With a flash, he appeared in the Hunyuan Sword sect. At this moment, the Hunyuan Sword sect was countless times more imposing than the Hunyuan Sword sect's mountain gate in the Divine Wilderness Great World. The entire sect not only occupied a great world, but also opened up 34 great worlds on the periphery of this great world as the Hunyuan Sword sect's outpost. If one wanted to go to the Hunyuan Sword sect, they had to first take a detour through these 34 great worlds before they could enter the Real Mountain Gate of the Hunyuan Sword sect. Among these 34 great worlds, there was at least one Dominator-level expert in charge of overseeing them. Among these Dominators, there were experts who had defected to the Hunyuan Sword sect over the years, and there were also Sword Masters who belonged to the Void Sword Pavilion. There were so many of them that there were nearly 130. Tsing Hui glanced at the periphery of these great worlds. Considering that he was about to face a great change that could be said to be fatal, in order to let his deterrence exist a little longer and let the Hunyuan Empire and the Hunyuan Sword sect have a smoother path in the future, he chose to appear directly. With the pressure of a top expert, he descended on the periphery of the Hunyuan Sword sect. At this moment, his incarnation had already reached an incredible level of strength. Even compared to the experts on the Divine List, such as the Black and White Reverends and the Dayan Holy Master, he was not inferior. If it were not for the fact that he didn't want to be too high-profile and arouse people's curiosity and unnecessary trouble, if he released his aura, even the likes of the Black and White Reverends and the Dayan Holy Master would be frightened. But even so, when he released a terrifying pressure that was equivalent to the 9-vein level or close to the 10-vein level, enveloping the periphery of the Hunyuan Sword sect, it still shocked everyone in the Hunyuan Sword sect and even all the spies lurking in the Hunyuan Sword sect. The news that he had come out of seclusion and had made great progress in his cultivation was spread by word of mouth to every corner of the territory of the Master of Chaos. Under the respectful welcome of the Dominators who were in charge of the periphery, Tsing Hui was directly transmitted to the great world occupied by the Hunyuan Sword sect through a great world in the periphery. When he arrived in this great world, the sect masters of the Hunyuan Sword sect, Firmament Master, Zhu Zhao Master, and Qingshui Dao Lord, who happened to be in charge here, came out to welcome him at the same time with a look of surprise. Great Elder Tsinghui. Tsinghui, you're out of seclusion. Welcome, Supreme Elder Ifejia. All kinds of voices kept coming, making the atmosphere a little chaotic. The main reason was that Tsinghui had come too quickly, so fast that Firmament Master, Zhuzhao Master, and the others did not have time to prepare. Masters, Qingshui Dao Lord. Tsinghui's gaze swept across the people in front of him. He saw many familiar faces, such as the Soothing Sound Sword Saint, the Mist Rue Sword Saint, Elder Floating Light, Sanyao Master, Purple Sky Sage, and so on. Especially, he also saw Nailin Fei, a relative of his mortal bloodline, among these people. Nailin Fei, who was originally the sect master of the Hunyuan Heaven sect, had also broken through to the supremacy stage after tens of thousands of years, becoming one of the thousands of supremacy experts in the Hunyuan sword sect. Such an achievement. It was probably far beyond her imagination. If it were not for the fact that she was related to Tsinghui's relatives and friends, it would be her limit to break through to the Golden Core stage, or even the True Element stage. Tsinghui nodded at Nailin Fei and greeted her. He had come here to meet these old friends and say goodbye. These people naturally included his mortal bloodline relatives, such as Nailin Fei, Zhou Yunqing, and so on. However, it was not the time to talk to them yet. Surrounded by Firmament Master, Zhuzhao Master, and the others, Tsinghui walked step by step toward the Hunyuan Sword Sect's main mountain range, a mountain peak that was tens of millions of kilometers high. However, when he arrived at a large square at the foot of the mountain, Tsinghui's gaze fell on the dozen or so statues at the entrance. To be more specific, he was looking at one of the statues. The statue looked lifelike, like a living person and its face. Tsinghui found it extremely familiar. This is a broken sword? Tsinghui asked. Yes, it is. Zhuzhao Master replied. Later, the power of the Hunyuan sword sect continued to expand, and it was difficult for him to hide in the divine wilderness world. At this time, the Yujing Great World, the northernmost Great World and other worlds invaded our divine wilderness world. He somehow escaped from the divine wilderness world and cultivated with the help of the carrier of Tao. When he was discovered by us, he was already hundreds of worlds away from our divine wilderness world, and his cultivation had reached the divine real body realm from the magic realm with the help of the carrier of Tao. Oh? How did you find him in the end? In the vast universe, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack to find a person with the power of the Hunyuan sword sect. In fact, we didn't even think of the way to find him. It was a sovereign at the level of a world lord who deliberately asked a supreme master who was proficient in the art of deduction to deduce his whereabouts from the divine wilderness world. It took a full 339 years to finally find his whereabouts, capture him, and send him to our Hunyuan sword sect as a congratulatory gift for the establishment of our Hunyuan sword sect. Oh! Tsinghui was a little surprised by this result. He didn't expect that it was a sovereign who wanted to curry favor with the Hunyuan sword sect, or to curry favor with him, a supreme expert. He deliberately asked a supreme master to spend a long time using the art of deduction to find broken sword. Although the broken sword was well hidden, it was still hard for it to escape the fate of being discovered by a ruler with powerful divination techniques. Although broken sword is only one of the many traitors wanted by our Hunyuan sword sect, he's the traitor who caused the most harm to the many elders of our Hunyuan sword sect. It's quite thoughtful of the sovereign to spend so much effort to find him and send him to our Hunyuan sword sect for us to deal with. Where is he? I'd like to see him in person. Tsinghui said. He had to put on a show like this to make the world understand the benefits of working for the Hunyuan sword sect. At the same time, he could use this method to intimidate everyone and make them understand the price of betraying the Hunyuan sword sect and harming the Hunyuan sword sect. Sure enough, as soon as he finished speaking, many of the onlookers looked vexed. Qing Su was a supreme expert, and he was an invincible existence that was worthy of being ranked on the god ranking. To any ruler, it would be a great honor to be received by such a peak existence. But now, it was such a precious opportunity, but because they hadn't been smart enough, they'd missed it and given it to someone else. Hegemen Chua seems to have been in our primordial empire recently. I'll summon him right away. I'll summon him, esteemed Zhu Zhao hurriedly said. Sovereign Che Luo? Xing Hui couldn't help but be surprised when he heard this. He hadn't expected. It was actually someone he knew. However, he didn't go into detail. Instead, he nodded and entered the Hunyuan sword sect, accompanied by esteemed Zhu Zhao and esteemed Firmament. Relying on his talent and ability, he successfully succeeded the throne 800 years ago and became the emperor of the Primordial Empire. Although it had only been a short period of time, the Primordial Immemorial Empire had undergone great reforms under his governance in the past 800 years. Xing Hui met him, and after confirming that he wasn't a reincarnation or possession, he gave him a law fragment and a creation artifact that was compatible with him as a reward. However, he was only in the sovereign realm, so even if he had a creation artifact, he wouldn't be able to use it in a short period of time. Unless he could become a powerful expert one day, the creation artifact would only be a special treasure with stronger defense to him. A year later, the banquet began. Xing Hui directly took out a law fragment and gave it to Sovereign Che Luo as a reward. If he could refine this law fragment, it would be of great help to him in breaking through to the sovereign realm. Sovereign Che Luo was filled with emotion as he held the law fragment. He never would have thought that the insignificant figure who had discovered the divine Yen civilization back then would grow to such an extent that even a dignified sovereign like him would have to think of ways to curry favor with him. Empress Longyu, who represented the Kuan Dragon Great World, was also present at the banquet under the lead of the Azure Dragon Sovereign. Unfortunately, the relationship between the two of them had already been severed. Apart from looking at the dazzling figure on the Hunyuan sword sect's high platform from afar, Empress Longyu didn't have the right to approach him at all. Naturally, she didn't have the right to talk to Xing Hui either. After all, there were dozens of powerful experts, thousands of sovereigns, and millions of sovereigns attending the banquet. She, who had relied on external help to become a sovereign, naturally didn't have the right to be met by Xing Hui alone. The only reason she was able to attend the banquet was because she had once been friends with Xing Hui. Time passed, and the banquet came to an end. The banquet lasted for 3 whole months before finally coming to an end. The Hunyuan sword sect returned to its peaceful state. At this time, Xing Hui announced that he would be going into seclusion again to pry into the mysteries of the 4th level of the Chaos Realm. This time, his seclusion would probably last longer than the previous one. Although this result made the cultivators who were rushing over but didn't have the chance to see Xing Hui feel regretful, they could understand. The higher one's cultivation level, the longer one's seclusion would last. People like the Grand Expansion Holy Master, Black and White Supremacy, Giant Dragon City Master, and Emperor Bai were the best examples. Unless something big happened, it was simply wishful thinking for ordinary people to see them. Among the powerful experts, there were also those who went into seclusion for millions of years. After briefing the Hunyuan sword sect, Xing Hui didn't leave. Therefore, he had already received the news. One person had already come out of seclusion and was rushing to the Hunyuan sword sect. At the peak of a mountain in the Hunyuan sword sect, Xing Hui stood on the platform of the mountain, watching the sun rise and set in front of him. It was as if he wanted to engrave this magnificent scene in his heart. "She's here." Suddenly, he opened his mouth and called out, "Xiao!" With a flash of sword light, an elegant and refined figure in white appeared behind him. Bai Shuaing. "What happened?" Bai Shuaing asked. "What do you mean, what happened?" The masters couldn't sense it. Perhaps even if they sensed it, they wouldn't think it would be a big deal due to their absolute confidence in you. However, I know that something extremely important must have happened. That's why your actions in the past few years. It's like saying goodbye. Bai Shuaing stepped forward and stood beside Xing Hui. "You're overthinking it. Nothing big happened." Bai Shuaing turned her head and looked at him with her starry eyes. Xing Hui didn't avoid her gaze. Instead, he met her gaze. After a long while, Bai Shuaing sighed and said, "I understand now. We don't have the right to get involved in this matter at all. There's no point in telling us or not telling us. Rather than adding to our worries, it's better to use a white lie to deceive us and leave us with a trace of longing. Xing Hui didn't expect Bai Shuai's senses to be so sharp. He didn't refute her words. When are you leaving? I'm about to leave. I don't have much time left. As Xing Hui spoke, his gaze fell on Bai Shuai. I'm waiting here. On one hand, I want to see you again. On the other hand, only you can receive my inheritance and maintain the prosperity of the Hunyuan sword sect. See you again. These 4 words caused Bai Shuai's body to tremble slightly. However, in the end, she didn't say anything. Just like how she had said goodbye to Xing Hui back then. At that time, she already knew that there was another woman in this man's heart. Perhaps that woman didn't occupy his entire heart, but this, however, was not what she wanted. Her open-mindedness was only to conceal the peacock-like pride in her heart. This pride wouldn't change for anyone. Even if it was for this man with peerless talent who stunned her, the world, and the entire chaotic universe, the Hunyuan Sword Emperor Xing Hui. I understand. Bai Shuai sighed. After a long while, Bai Shuai let out a long sigh. Don't worry. As long as I'm still in this world, I won't let the Hunyuan Sword sect, which is equivalent to the safe haven of the divine wilderness great world, die out in this universe. I believe you. Xing Hui nodded. After saying this, he took out a bracelet and handed it to Bai Shuai. Void Heaven Bracelet. The Void Heaven Ring was able to suppress the incarnations of the Master of Gods and the Lord of Time. Moreover, in the 60,000 years he had spent in the immortal Tao civilization, he had refined the Void Heaven Ring again, greatly increasing its sealing ability. Now, it could even suppress the incarnation of the Lord of Chaos. The space within it had also become extremely stable. Even the small worlds of cultivators who could create worlds with a single thought could be contained within it, without the phenomenon of the other party's world exploding. I'll give you everything in here. There are also many law fragments and a few divine creation artifacts. With the continuous supply of these law fragments, I estimate that it won't be difficult for you to cultivate to the equivalent of a 6th vein level in 100,000 years. In addition, there's a divine creation artifact that I've tailored for you. With it, you might not be able to unleash the power of my Scarlet Abyss sword, but it'll be enough for you to suppress ordinary supreme experts. After saying this, Xing Hui said in a low voice, with my actions this time, it shouldn't be difficult to intimidate those small fries for 100,000 years. 100,000 years is enough. Bai Shuai nodded and took the Void Heaven Bracelet. The resources in the Void Heaven Bracelet represented a responsibility. From now on, she would have to shoulder the responsibility of protecting the Origin Sword sect in place of Xing Hui. You won't be able to return for 100,000 years. Return? Xing Hui shook his head. Perhaps? I won't be able to return again. Shuang, I hope you can live your life to the fullest. Xing Hui turned around and looked at the beautiful and otherworldly Bai Shuai with a serious expression. Bai Shuai met Xing Hui's gaze. At this moment, she really wanted to step forward, persuade him to stay, or do something else. However, she couldn't do it. Xing Hui didn't force her. If Bai Shuai really gave in to him on this matter, then she wouldn't be Bai Shuai anymore. All right, I hope we'll have a chance to meet again. We will. I believe that we will. Bai Shuai said solemnly. Xing Hui smiled and nodded at her. In the next moment, his figure turned into a streak of light, shot into the sky, and disappeared without a trace. Chapter 991. Origin Mountains. On a mountain peak closest to the heart of the Origin Mountain Range, an enormous clan flourished and prospered. Unlike the cultivation system of the Lord of Chaos, the cultivation system of the immortal Tao civilization had a unique advantage in prolonging one's lifespan. Even false immortals had an endless lifespan, let alone true immortals. As the father of Green Ruins and the bloodline of a chaotic Yuan saint, Qin Yuming obviously enjoyed a unique environment and resources in the world of immortals. With these resources and cultivation environment, even though his talent for cultivation was not worth mentioning, he still managed to break through to pseudo-immortal after over 60,000 years. He possessed a lifespan of several 100,000 years or even several million years. In addition, each of his descendants had their own fortuitous encounters. Qin Yusen and Harry both broke through to the true immortal realm by relying on their kinship with Tsing Hui. In the long years after Tsing Hui left the immortal Dao civilization, Qin Yuming had given him a younger brother, Qin Yuqi, either out of boredom or a whim. Qin Yuqi also displayed considerable cultivation talent, cultivating to the true immortal realm with the help of many resources. Moreover, he had produced many descendants along the way, passing down his legacy from generation to generation. At this moment, after tens of thousands of years, even if Qin Yuming did not have such thoughts at all, he had still become an ancestor-level existence of the Qin clan. He had tens of thousands of descendants, and there were even several true immortals in the clan. He could be said to be one of the most powerful clans in the Origin Mountains. Because the higher one's cultivation, the more resources one needed, even though Jiang Shengdao and the others had broken through to the false immortal realm long ago, they were still stuck at the true immortal realm after so many years. There was only one true immortal lord who was equivalent to a supreme. This was a genius who had not been born in the same era as Tsing Hui, but had surpassed him in less than 40,000 years to become an immortal lord. How the world has changed. Tsing Hui was a void immortal lord. No, he should be the void immortal emperor now. Under the guidance of the void immortal emperor, he overlooked the entire Origin Mountains. Right now, the cultivators of the source world no longer needed the support of immortal monarchs in secret. Countless cultivators of the source world had infiltrated the various worlds and sects of the immortal Dao civilization, spreading their branches and leaves. Perhaps it was because of the creation jade, or perhaps it was for other reasons, but the cultivators of the source world were quite talented and had made a name for themselves in the immortal Dao civilization. Of course, due to the limitation of the strongest being only a celestial duke, their so-called reputation was also limited to a certain extent. Tens of thousands of years have brought about too many changes. This is all due to the outstanding talent of the cultivators from the source world. Many cultivators from the first source world have already begun to return to the first source world. In addition, the first source world has formed a council responsible for fighting for their own interests when there are conflicts with other sects and factions. High Wire, Qin Yusen, and Qin Yuqi are all part of the council. Hua Su Immortal Emperor explained to Tsing Hui with a smile. Tsing Hui nodded. He did not have much affection for his younger siblings, and even his stepmother, Madame Hiding, was similarly indifferent. The only person he truly recognized as family was Qin Yuming. Immortal Emperor Hua Su, you can leave me here. Go and do your own things. There's no need to accompany me. I also need to have a good gathering with my family. Tsing Hui said. Of course, I'll take my leave now. Immortal Emperor Hua Su did not dare to disturb him. He bowed respectfully and quickly retreated. He could be said to have relied entirely on Qing Su's support to be able to reach his current level of attainment. Otherwise, who knew how many tens of thousands of years it would take for him to become an immortal emperor at his current level of cultivation? As a result, he would not go against any of Qing Su's will. After Immortal Emperor Hua Su left, Tsing Hui's figure flashed and appeared at the peak of the mountain range where Qin Yuming and the others lived. Even though this mountain range was protected by layer upon layer of formations, he seemed to disregard these formations that were only at the 20th level at most, and he didn't cause any commotion as he directly arrived outside a courtyard where Qin Yuming resided. At this moment, he was chatting with a man who was 70% similar to him in this courtyard. It was not difficult to tell from the same bloodline that emanated from the man's body. This person was the younger brother that Qin Yuming had added to him tens of thousands of years ago, Qin Yuming. The father and son chatted happily, and Qin Yuming's face was also full of smiles. Looking at this scene, Tsing Hui understood in his heart, Qin Yuming's appearance was not because Qin Yuming was bored, nor was it because of a whim. It was a kind of yearning. The target of this yearning was him, Tsing Hui. After understanding this, Tsing Hui felt a trace of guilt in his heart. Even though he had contributed a lot to this family, but from the perspective of a son, he was not qualified. Standing outside, Tsing Hui watched quietly. After a long time, he did not set foot in the courtyard. Instead, he placed some resources in Qin Yuming's room that could be used for cultivation, healing injuries, and extending lifespan. A void immortal's lifespan could reach hundreds of thousands or even millions of years, but they were not truly immortal. Only when one reached the true immortal realm could one be said to shine as brightly as the sun and moon, and live as long as heaven and earth. Putting these aside, Xing Hui sighed inwardly. Time gradually passed. The attacks of the Master of Time, the Master of Gods, the Master of Chaos, as well as the various creation and chaos life forms, were much faster than he had imagined. Moreover, he had already wasted a lot of time in the divine wilderness great world. There was not much time left for him. At best, he only had 1 year. 1 year. With a flash, Xing Hui left the Origin Mountain Range and walked through the void, quickly heading in the direction of the Eastern Sun Sword sect. Right now, Jiang Ningji had already cultivated to the Immortal Lord realm, which was the sovereign realm. Although she could not be considered a top expert in the Immortal Dao civilization, she belonged to the group of people close to the top. She was fully qualified to establish her own sect. In fact, although the order of the Immortal Dao civilization was much stricter than that of the Master of Chaos, one could establish their own sect as long as they reached the true immortal realm. Some void immortals even established their own sects and forces to recruit disciples. The sect of an immortal monarch would naturally attract an endless stream of cultivators to come and learn from it. When Xing Hui arrived at the Eastern Sun Sword sect, the first thing he saw was not the magnificent sect, but, in the depths of the Eastern Sun Sword sect, there was a nameless mountain peak that seemed to be a forbidden area. The nameless mountain peak only occupied a few dozen kilometers of mountaintop. It was not worth mentioning compared to the Eastern Sun Sword sect, which covered an area of 100,000 kilometers. However, it was protected by layers of formations that even an immortal emperor would not be able to easily enter. The layout of the mountain peak was exactly the same as the Eastern Sun Sword sect on Earth. Eastern Sun Sword sect, Xing Hui murmured. Then he took a step forward, ignoring the formations that could give immortal emperors a headache, and appeared in the Eastern Sun Sword sect. Although it was a forbidden area, it was not completely empty. Xing Hui sensed 6 life auras in the mountain peak. Among the 6 life auras, one of them was old and seemed to not have much time left. The other 5 life auras were full of vitality. The aura they emitted was also vast and mighty. The most powerful life aura was already at the level of a void immortal. When Xing Hui's gaze fell on the old life aura, he was slightly taken aback. The next moment, he appeared beside the old man. Elder Guku? His voice rang out. Guku, who was cleaning the hall in front of him, trembled when he heard Xing Hui's voice. He immediately looked at him and said, Xing Hui, is it really you? Elder Guku. Xing Hui looked at the old man in front of him. This was the elder who had protected Jiang Ningji when the Eastern Sun Sword sect was destroyed. Who would have thought that after so many years, he would still be loyal to Jiang Ningji? Even now, he still didn't leave her. You're back, you're finally back. I'll call the young sect master. I'll go inform her right away. There's no need. As the sect master, she must be very busy. Moreover, I sensed her aura in the room outside for less than 24 hours. She should come here often. Yes. The young sect master comes here almost every few days. No matter what trouble she faces outside, as long as she's here, she can calm down and adjust her state of mind. Then let's wait for her here. Xing Hui said. At the same time, he said, let's take a walk outside, just like back then. There are many places in the Eastern Sun Sword sect that I've forgotten. It's hard for you to restore it so accurately. Yes, I'll take you around and tell you about the Eastern Sun Sword sect. In fact, although you entered the Eastern Sun Sword sect, there are many places in the Eastern Sun Mountain that you haven't been to, right? I'll take you there now. Of course. Xing Hui said with a smile. The reason why I chose to enter the Eastern Sun Sword sect was because I was attracted by my senior sister. If it weren't for her, I might not have entered the Eastern Sun Sword sect. In the martial arts circle, there wouldn't be a person called Sword Saint Xing Hui. When Elder Guku heard this, A smile appeared on his face as he said, "Young sect master was indeed valiant and heroic back then, elegant and charming. At that time, there were many disciples in our sect who had fallen in love with her. And among these disciples, only you stood out and were able to obtain young sect master's favor." "Her favor?" Tsing Hui paused and asked. "Elder Guku, when I searched for you on Earth, you should have seen it, right? Why didn't you and my senior sister show up?" Hearing Tsing Hui's question, Elder Guku's smile froze for a moment. After a while, he sighed and said, "The young sect master's inferiority complex caused trouble. Back then, in order to avoid being hunted down, she suffered a lot. Later, in order to obtain a powerful cultivation to revive the Eastern Sun Sword sect, she fought with fierce beasts and was covered in scars. How could she still be as beautiful as before? At that time, you were the most powerful person on Earth, shining brightly. In addition, the young sect master has always blamed herself for dragging you down because of the Eastern Sun Sword sect. So she didn't want to show up." Hearing this, Tsing Hui couldn't help but fall silent. After a while, he said slowly, "I promised my senior sister that I would look for her in 10 years. This was my promise, although, in the end, it was delayed for 14 years. I know. You're a good kid, both of you are good kids, but..." Guku sighed. Tsing Hui opened his mouth and was about to say something, but at this moment, he seemed to sense something and suddenly looked toward the void. Almost at the same time, a beautiful figure floated over from the void. Then, as if they had a telepathic connection, she looked in his direction. The two gazes seemed to cross the river of time and instantly met in the void. Time seemed to freeze at this moment. Chapter 992. What was the scene that left the deepest impression in Tsing Hui's life? It wasn't the first time he cultivated true energy, nor was it the first time he manifested his divine true body. It wasn't the first time Bai Shuang boldly cultivated in seclusion in front of him and gave him absolute trust. It wasn't the first time he obtained a divine creation artifact, and it definitely wasn't the moment he broke through to become a chaotic creature. It was a long time ago. It was a sunny morning. At that time, there was a gentle breeze, blue sky, white clouds, and green trees. In a certain place? It could be a park, a martial arts center, or a forest. He saw a young girl, a lively ponytail fluttering in the wind, a bare-faced face, an exquisite dancing figure, and a valiant and heroic grace. That scene was deeply imprinted in his mind, and he had never forgotten it for a moment. And now, it was also a similar scene. A beautiful figure dressed in white, a slender waist with a long sword hanging from it, a ponytail fluttering in the wind, and a pretty face that was still beautiful despite having weathered many hardships. The two scenes at this moment crossed the barrier of tens of thousands of years and overlapped. "Tsing Hui, yes, I'm back." Tsing Hui looked at Jiang Ningji and suddenly felt that everything was like a fleeting cloud that had completely dissipated. All words, all reasons, all excuses, all fantasies, no longer had any meaning. At this moment, in his eyes, there was only this figure that had been engraved in the depths of his heart since he was young. This was his truest heart. This was his truest self. Compared to the time we agreed on, it's a little late, but I'm still back. Tsing Hui added with a smile. Jiang Ningji descended from the void and looked at Tsing Hui, but for a moment, she didn't know what to do. At this moment, what Tsing Hui did was to follow his heart and put aside all his worries and distracting thoughts. He stepped forward and took this figure that had been imprinted in his heart since he was young, and he had never forgotten it, into his arms. Everything came naturally when the conditions were right. Immediately, Jiang Ningji was relieved, and her body and mind relaxed as she leaned on him. At the side, Guku watched with a gratified smile in his eyes. Recalling the bits and pieces of their lives, there was a trace of sadness on his face. How many years had it been, young sect master and Tsing Hui? He had finally reached this moment. Time passed. Tsing Hui and Jiang Ningji confided in each other. Unknowingly, a day had passed. Next, Jiang Ningji led the way and brought Tsing Hui around Dongyang Mountain, truly understanding the details of the mountain. Qing Su had joined the Eastern Sun Sword sect for far too short a time after all. Moreover, he spent most of his time practicing the sword, so he did not know much about the Eastern Sun Mountain. However, Jiang Ningji had been born and raised in the Eastern Sun Mountain. Every single piece of grass and scenery on the entire mountain possessed her childhood memories. It was exactly because of that she could still restore the Eastern Sun Mountain after several tens of thousand years. Her impression of the Eastern Sun Mountain was just far too deep. Jiang Ningji excitedly described the scenery of Eastern Sun Mountain, and Xing Hui listened patiently. What they were talking about was actually very trivial, and Xing Hui only needed to release his divine consciousness to accurately understand every corner of Eastern Sun Mountain. However, he didn't do so. Like a mortal, he naturally held hands with Jiang Ningji, like a man and woman in love, walking on the mountain path of Eastern Sun Mountain, recalling the past of mortals. If that accident hadn't happened, perhaps, in the next few years, this would have been my life. We might have come together naturally. Well, maybe my parents would have objected a little, but they're still sensible. If I insisted, they would have respected my choice. In the end, I would have married Ningji and had children on Eastern Sun Mountain, Xing Hui thought to himself. Unsurprisingly, this was his future life. Moreover, he didn't mind living this mortal life. Unfortunately, Qing Su, strictly speaking, there are only 3 people left in our Eastern Sun Sword sect. Miyunguku, you're the sword saint of our Eastern Sun Sword sect. Let's go. I'll take you there right now and introduce you to the other disciples of our sect. Moreover, I've taken in quite a few talented disciples in the past few years, so I'll focus on teaching them. I'll take them over right now and let them get to know your uncle master. Jiang Ningji took Xing Hui's hand and walked toward the Eastern Sun Sword sect with a smile. Xing Hui nodded slightly and let Jiang Ningji take him to meet her disciples. In fact, he had already checked her disciples with his divine consciousness. They were indeed talented, but they were just not bad. If they didn't have any special opportunities, their future achievements would at most reach the immortal monarch realm or even the true immortal realm. As for the immortal emperor realm or the great divine ability realm, there was no hope. However, he naturally wouldn't say this out loud. Moreover, with his current ability and means, if these disciples were really loyal to the Eastern Sun Sword sect and had won Jiang Ningji's favor, it wouldn't hurt for him to give them some guidance. With this thought, Xing Hui was about to follow Jiang Ningji to the main hall of the Eastern Sun Sword sect. However, at this moment, the divine light on his body suddenly dimmed, and he stopped on the spot. This change startled Jiang Ningji slightly. She asked with concern, "Xing Hui, what's wrong?" "Nothing, let's keep going," Xing Hui said with a smile. But for some reason, Jiang Ningji looked at Xing Hui again and vaguely felt that he was a little unfamiliar. Although he didn't seem to have changed from the previous Xing Hui in terms of spiritual sense and spiritual aura, but, indeed, it was different again. However, Jiang Ningji couldn't pinpoint exactly what was different about him. It's too fast. In the chaotic void, Xing Hui's body, which was so huge that it could be said to be tens of billions of light years in size, suddenly sighed. "Give me a little more time. Even if it's a month. Even if it's just a day." As he spoke, he looked at the chaotic void in front of him. The Master of Gods, the Master of Time, the Master of Chaos, and many other chaotic and destiny-level beings were surging over with monstrous killing intent. They had already completely sealed off all escape routes. Although their attacks would probably take a few more months to truly arrive, the chaotic Yuan Qi stirred up by so many peak life forms attacking with all their strength had already completely disrupted the space and time in this area. Even though the chaos void was supposed to operate in an orderly manner, it had become a mess in this chaotic void. Under the interference of this power, his main body and incarnation could barely sense each other. He had no choice but to cut off the incarnation's consciousness and let it continue to accompany senior sister Jiang Ningji. Otherwise, the moment the main body senses were disrupted, the incarnation would die on the spot because it couldn't sense the main body's location. But even so, if he truly died, the incarnation that contained his consciousness would definitely crumble as well. Time is more pressing than I thought. However, I've already met everyone I should meet, and all my long-cherished wishes have been fulfilled. Although the final ending isn't perfect, since I'll face this moment sooner or later, what difference does it make if it's earlier or later? As Tsing-Hui spoke, he looked straight ahead at the many peak life forms who were risking their lives in search of the mysteries of eternity. Having only become a chaotic life form for a short time, he couldn't understand these life forms' pursuit and desire for the ultimate eternity. However, perhaps if he were to be like them, trapped in this realm for billions of years, tortured by a meaningless life for billions of years, he would also go crazy for the hope and dawn of a step further. Right now, this madness was just a little bit ahead of schedule. We'll face this moment sooner or later. What difference does it make if it's earlier or later? Then, what are we waiting for? Let's step onto this path of eternity together and see what the ultimate eternity is. Having said that, Tsing-Hui no longer controlled the boiling power in his body. The entire chaotic universe and even the eldritch world, all the energy, life essence, and essence of divine Yuan all burned wildly, turning into the purest nourishment and firewood that poured into the long river of time. As this power poured into the river, the originally faintly discernible long river of time suddenly became incomparably clear. The aura of the ultimate eternity was exposed at this moment without any reservation, dissipating and releasing. In the long river of time, one could even see countless scenes of time. At this moment, these scenes of time no longer existed in the form of information that couldn't be understood, but were actual scenes. In the countless scenes, there were gods, masters of time, masters of chaos, as well as creation and chaos life forms throwing themselves into the long river of time. This scene seemed to be the end of all life forms, the end of all life forms, eternity. Eternity. That's the path of eternity. So the secret of eternity in the immortal Tao civilization can only be revealed in this way. It requires a chaos or creation life form of the immortal Tao civilization to burn themselves in order to manifest it. I almost made a huge mistake and missed the ultimate eternity by a hair's breadth. How laughable! To think that the path of eternity we've been searching for all these years can be manifested so easily. It's laughable that we've done so much for nothing. The path of eternity. The end of this path is the end of eternity, the end of eternity. Everyone understood what was going on when they saw the path of eternity that had been manifested from the burning of green ruins. For a moment, whether it was the peak experts like the Master of Chaos, the Master of Time, the Master of Gods, or the Chaos life forms and creation life forms at the fourth layer of the Chaos realm, they all sighed emotionally. If they'd known that the path of eternity could only be manifested in this way, why would they have fought to the death with the immortal Tao civilization? Cooperation. Only then could they achieve a true win-win situation. Fortunately, although they'd only just learned the truth of the immortal Tao civilization's path of eternity, it wasn't too late. At this moment, the path of eternity was finally unfolding before them. Immediately, the Master of Gods, the Master of Time, the Master of Chaos, and the various life forms of creation and chaos were all eager to follow Qing Su, who had set himself on fire and entered the path of eternity with great determination and courage. They stepped into the river of time that represented the path of eternity. Chapter 993. Eternity. Tsing-Hui stepped into the river of time and sank into the depths of the river of time. This was a river that flowed forward and kept drifting into the distance as if there was no end in sight. However, what formed this river was not river water in the conventional sense. Instead, it was images that flew extremely quickly. As the images moved just too quickly, they were so fast that they seemed like streaks of light. As a result, Qing Su felt like he was in a river of light. The flowing light filled the surroundings. Every time he focused his gaze on these streams of light, they seemed to slow down gradually, allowing him to see the images in them clearly. The more he focused on these streams of light, the more attentive he was, the slower the images became. When his mind was completely immersed in this stream of light, the surrounding environment, there was a sudden change. He came to a barren mountain peak. Countless divine weapons were stabbed into the mountain, and they looked somewhat familiar. Moreover, he saw a person on this mountain peak. A person holding a sword and moving forward step by step. person who looked exactly like him, or it could be said that it was his own figure. And this mountain peak, he abruptly recalled it as well. Myriad Swords Peak. This was the Myriad Swords Peak of the Hidden Sword sect. The image in front of him recorded the scene of him breaking into the Myriad Swords Peak. However, it was slightly different from when he was breaking into the Myriad Swords Peak. When he was breaking into the Myriad Swords Peak, he suddenly had an epiphany during the competition with the sword spirit of Chasing Edge. Finally, he achieved the great achievement of 100 Swords chant at the same time. However, the person in front of him was obviously much more domineering. He actually used his own strength to force his way to the peak of the Myriad Swords Peak. After breaking into the peak, he did not understand the mystery of the Myriad Swords Peak and was still unwilling to give up, so he tried to destroy the Myriad Swords Peak. Then, the 7-star sword spirit hidden in the Myriad Swords Peak attacked. A streak of sword essence. A streak of sword essence that could not be any simpler destroyed his divine consciousness just like that. After all, his cultivation was not worth mentioning compared to the 7-star sword spirit who was at the supreme level. Not to mention that the 7-star sword spirit gave him a streak of sword essence. Even if it released the terrifying aura of a supreme level fighter, it could easily crush him into dust. And then, the image dissipated, and the stream of light also dimmed, disappearing into the long river of light. Throughout the entire process, Xing Hui could only watch like a bystander, unable to intervene in the slightest. Is this one of my branches in the river of time? Xing Hui muttered to himself. Now that he had reached the 5th level of the primal chaos realm, he was no longer as ignorant as before about the river of time and the power of time. This could be deduced from his actions and decisions to influence the future. He understood extremely well that in the space that humans lived in, basically countless parallel spaces and parallel lines would appear at every moment. Due to a certain action or decision, the self of each line would split into even more timelines. These timelines and parallel spaces could be described as endless. Perhaps they would collapse along with the end of the Green Ruins, or perhaps they would continue existing for all eternity. If a 6th-level primal chaos realm wanted to advance further, they would have to reign in their own timelines, condensing all timelines into one, and finally jump out of the river of time, transcending time and space, becoming the only true self. At that time, other than the timeline where the cultivator existed, all other timelines would disappear. It was a pity. It was one thing to understand it, but it was another thing to do it. Just like how all mortals understood that as long as they could control the atmosphere, they could control the life and death of all life on a star. But the problem was, how could one control the atmosphere? Xing Hui watched silently. The flowing light of the river of time not only recorded a lot of information, but it also took away the information of his own life form. As time passed, he would gradually forget all sorts of things. All the imprints that belonged to sentient beings would be washed away by the power of time, until one day he would completely forget everything. All information that was equivalent to his self would vanish into nothingness. When that time came, he would even forget the two concepts of life and death. He would be reduced to the pure power of time, completely merging into the river of time, surging forward with the river of time, day after day, never stopping. Ultimate eternity. Xing Hui's gaze fell on the densely packed timelines that filled his body. Once again, he projected his consciousness onto one of them. The light gradually slowed down, returning to a picture. As he focused his consciousness, he seemed to have merged into this timeline. The him in this timeline had lived much longer than the him in the previous timeline. The changes in Tianhuang mainland and the divine wilderness great world had not knocked him down. He had cultivated to the realm of great God in one go, and he had also learned of the relationship between the burning blood lord and the blood-colored statue. However, he had chosen to hand over the blood-colored statue that the burning blood lord had transformed into to the master of chaos, but the outcome, naturally, the incarnation of the master of chaos had sensed the creation jade on him. The Master of Chaos had thought that he and the Burning Blood Lord were originally one, and he had been killed in one fell swoop. The time record was very long. Tsing Hui had followed in the footsteps of this him, from when he was a mortal to the peak of great God, crossing thousands of years. After thousands of years, he had already faintly sensed that he had begun to forget some things. However, as for what exactly he had forgotten, because it was too subtle, it did not attract his attention. In other words, even if he wanted to recall the things that he had already forgotten, he could no longer recall them. Without any clues about breaking through to ultimate eternity, Tsing Hui had no choice but to look at the third scene of the River of Time. In this timeline, he had died at the hands of cruel sword before he had even left the eastern wasteland. Then, in the next timeline, this timeline was even shorter. He had actually been killed by Lai Wung. Until his death, his cultivation had only been a mere true Qi realm. However, this was not the shortest. Tsing Hui had also seen a timeline where he had been killed by Yuan Yang. This timeline was very short, but it was not the most tragic. In the most tragic timeline, he had actually been crippled by Jin Go, and then he had been persecuted by Zhuo Fengyun, Zhuo Xiangdong, and Zhuo Fenglei. He had died of depression. Although he had lived for 4 years longer than the timeline where he had died at the hands of Yuan Yang, the degree of grievance he had suffered was far greater than that timeline. In the following period of time, all Tsing Hui could do was constantly watch himself court death in different ways: mortal realm, immortality realm, saint realm, divine realm, chaos realm. In each realm, he had to die hundreds or thousands of times. This was because he had seen too few timelines. The more he saw, the more likely he would die. There were even a few times where he had died at the hands of Bai Shuang, Sword Master Bai Heng. This also made Tsing Hui a little speechless. Although they were all themselves, not all of them had the same personality. In the later stages, some of them relied on their strong cultivation to abuse their power and bully others. It wasn't impossible for them to be killed by others on behalf of the heavens. There was even a timeline where he had cultivated to the sovereign realm. He had even opened a harem and had 36 million beauties. Even he was amazed when he saw it. The times made the man. It was indeed true. In addition to these timelines that made him speechless, there were many timelines that had made Tsing Hui addicted to them more than once. Those were the timelines of the world on Earth. In those timelines, he had finally gotten together with Jiang Ningji, gotten married, had children, and had many children and grandchildren. Of course, not every timeline related to Earth was so harmonious and perfect. In some timelines, he and Jiang Ningji were also forced by external pressure. Although they had a deep relationship, they had no choice but to part ways. In the end, he would marry a woman arranged by his family and spend the rest of his life either happily or unhappily. As for Jiang Ningji, she would also marry someone else and walk into a happy or unlucky future. There were all kinds of futures and countless possibilities. After seeing too many of them, he gradually began to feel numb. However, these timelines all had a common characteristic, and that was that the higher his cultivation realm, the fewer timelines there were. He had already seen hundreds of thousands of timelines of the mortal realm and the immortality realm. He had seen thousands of timelines of the saint realm. However, when it came to the divine realm and the chaos realm, the number of timelines decreased sharply. In particular, there were less than 10 timelines that could cultivate to the great divine realm. And among these 10 timelines, there was only one that could cultivate to the immortal realm. Of course, this did not prove that such timelines did not exist. After all, he had received many timelines about him becoming a chaos life form, which could prove that there were similar timelines. It was just that, from this point, it could be determined that the formation of the timelines was not without any pattern. Unfortunately, it was meaningless. Pattern. This word flashed through Tsing Hui's mind. The next moment, he had already forgotten this word. The countless experiences and images had already made him numb. His thoughts gradually stiffened and decayed. What is a pattern? What am I doing? Where am I going? More and more, Tsing Hui began to think about this question. Hundreds of thousands, millions of timelines. The short ones were a few months, the long ones were a few thousand years. If the concept of time existed in the long river of time, then it would be at least a few million years, tens of millions of years, hundreds of millions of years. The internal and external forces work together. causing Tsing Hui's consciousness to completely sink into the long river of time. He kept sinking and sinking, forgetting himself, forgetting everything, until eternal damnation. Eternal damnation. Unknowingly, Tsing Hui seemed to have recovered a little bit of consciousness and understood the concept of eternal damnation. After realizing this concept, he gradually heard some shouts, just like a person in a dream who heard a series of sleep-talking in a daze. As for himself, as he recovered his consciousness, he also understood that if he really fell into eternal damnation, then everything would be over. Although he had recovered a little bit of consciousness, he still could not understand why he had to wake up and what would happen after everything was over. However, with the support of an unknown Wu, he got rid of this nightmare that had lasted for millions of years and slowly opened his eyes. Chapter 994. Tsing Hui opened his eyes, but his consciousness was still rather blurry. Even after understanding his own existence, he was still in a hazy state. Until a voice kept shouting beside him. Only then did he focus his attention a little. His gaze fell on the owner of this voice. It was a special life form that seemed to be completely made of time. "You're finally awake." This special life form heaved a sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from its shoulders. However, Tsing Hui continued to look at it, his mind blank. He did not say a word. Seeing this, the special life form said with some relief, "Fortunately, I did my best to close up your timeline. Now, I'll return the scattered information in your timeline to you. I hope it'll help you recover." As it spoke, this special life form pointed a finger at Tsing Hui's forehead. During this entire process, Ching Su did not seem to know what resistance was at all. He did not even realize what this action signified between two people who possessed life forms. As this special life form pointed at Tsing Hui's forehead, many images and information from Tsing Hui's timeline instantly replayed in his mind. From when he had obtained the fortune jade from the Eastern Sun Sword sect, he had wandered and experienced many hardships, from the eastern wastelands to the Tianhuang continent, then from the Tianhuang continent to other worlds, the Master of Chaos territory, and the Master of Time's territory. Finally, he had become a great master, a supreme expert, and a chaos life form. He had even resonated with the immortal Dao civilization, borrowed the power of the immortal Dao civilization, and became a creation and chaos life form. He had rushed to the 5th level of the chaos realm, and finally, under the pressure of the Master of Time, the Master of Gods, the Master of Chaos, and many other peak life forms, he had opened the path of eternity and fallen into the river of time. As for the memories he had lost in the river of time, he had completely forgotten them. This special life form in front of him seemed to be unable to collect all the images and information he had experienced after entering the river of time. After obtaining the tremendous amount of information that he had lost a long time ago, Ching Su spent a very long time before he finally returned to his senses. How long have I been in that state of unconsciousness? How long? The special life form chuckled. Do you think there's a concept of time in the river of time? Billions of years and an instant are actually just two different branches of the river of time. When Tsing Hui heard this, he calmed himself down. After all, he had once stepped into the 5th level of the chaotic realm and trained himself to the undying realm. He quickly adjusted his state of mind. As he regained his calmness, his gaze fell on this special life form again. He seemed to have thought of something and suddenly said, "Green duckweed sword spirit?" The special life form glanced at Tsing Hui in surprise and nodded with a smile. "I didn't expect you to guess so quickly. However, I am the sword spirit of the Qingping sword." As expected, in that case, the scenes transmitted from the river of time were also done by you? The sword spirit nodded. "In truth, I did my best to transmit that final scene to you because I wanted to tell you the true secret of the eternal road. Unfortunately, you only understood what the eternal road of our immortal Dao civilization was at the very last moment. At that time, it was already too late for you to explain to the Master of Time, the Master of Gods, the Master of Primal Chaos, and the many other life forms of creation and chaos. In the end, I could only think of a way to lock onto your timeline and spend a lot of effort to find you in the river of time. When Xing heard this, he nodded in realization. After a while, he asked impatiently, the Master of Gods, Master of Time, Master of Chaos, and the other life forms, have they stepped into the eternal road? That's right. As a peak saint, the energy in your body is enough to ignite the eternal road for tens of thousands of years. Whether it's the creations or chaos beings, or those who happen to be nearby, they've all entered the eternal road. The environment outside the immortal Tao civilization is now unprecedentedly clear. There probably aren't any chaos beings or creations within 1,000,000 years. In other words, what you've done can ensure the safety of the immortal Tao civilization for at least 1,000,000 years. When Xing heard this, he couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Looks like my actions aren't completely meaningless. My sacrifice isn't completely worthless. The Qingping sword spirit smiled and nodded. Right, what about the Master of Chaos, Master of Gods, Master of Time, and the creations and chaos beings? When they stepped into the river of time, did any of them successfully retract their timeline, become one, and step into the ultimate eternity? Become one, retract their timeline, and step into the ultimate eternity. The sword spirit smiled. In truth, the answer should have been revealed the moment you stepped into the river of time. The answer should have been revealed the moment I stepped into the river of time. Xing didn't quite understand. Become one, what do you mean by become one? Any timeline related to him will be retracted by him. In other words, when he breaks through to the ultimate eternity, his figure will no longer exist in any of the scenes in the river of time. However, in the many branches of time and parallel universes you see in the river of time, haven't you seen the Master of Gods, Master of Time, and Master of Chaos more than once? This is proof enough. All failed? All of them failed. It's easier said than done to retract timelines and become one. Now that you're in the river of time, you should be able to see the difference between the ultimate eternity realm and the sixth tier of chaos realm. The ultimate eternity retracts his timeline, and he can travel freely in the river of time. In other words, if he wants to deal with existences like the Master of Chaos, Master of Gods, and Master of Time, even if he doesn't go to their timelines to kill them when they're weak, he can pull out hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of Master of Chaos, Master of Gods, and Master of Gods from other parallel timelines to deal with them. The difference between the two realms can't be described with words. When Xing heard what the sword spirit said, his eyes narrowed. Pulling out thousands of Master of Gods, Master of Time, and Master of Chaos from other timelines to deal with the Master of Time, Master of Gods, and Master of Chaos in his timeline, such means. So this is the ultimate eternity realm. Xing took a deep breath and said, I originally thought that the difference between chaos beings, creation beings, and great beings was huge enough. Even though tens of thousands of great beings couldn't compete with a great being who had just become a creation being, they could at least see the difference between each other. However, compared to the ultimate eternity realm, the gap between peak chaos beings and creation beings is so huge that they can't even see the difference between each other. That's right. It's like an ordinary being on a mortal planet without extraordinary power. He can't understand the greatness of the will of the universe. The difference between the two realms can't be described with words, the sword spirit said. The longer I stay in the river of time, the more I witness the timelines of intelligent life forms. The more I understand the greatness and supremacy of that realm. Xing nodded. After a short while, he shifted the topic to the Qingping sword spirit. That's right, why have you been floating in the river of time? Moreover, why have you not been corroded by the river of time and lost yourself? I can't explain this. The sword spirit pondered and said, maybe, it's related to the great plate of ancestors and the plate of eternity. Plate of eternity. Xing fell silent. After a while, he said slowly, I want to know if I can leave the river of time and return to my timeline? Do you know how I found you? You have a lamp on you. That lamp is like a lighthouse in the fog, guiding me to your location. Xing Hui's heart skipped a beat. He immediately understood that the lamp should be the mysterious lamp from the Master of Red Hell. What's that lamp? No one knows. The difference between the Chaos Realm and the Eternal Realm is too great. Anything related to the Eternal Realm isn't something we can understand, but I can give you some answers about you and everything about you. The Sword Spirit smiled and said, "To be honest, I've been observing your timeline for a very long time." Observing me? Sing Hui's heart skipped a beat as he keenly thought of something. The creation jade. The Sword Spirit nodded. Can I see what happened through the river of time? You don't have the ability to observe the river of time. In fact, you can only observe the timeline that belongs to you. Please tell me. Sing Hui didn't insist. If you want to go into detail, you have to go back to a very long time ago, which is the battle that destroyed the immortal Dao civilization. At that time, we didn't know what kind of mysteries were hidden in the immortal Dao civilization. We only thought of ways to expel the invading creation and chaos life forms from the immortal Dao civilization, closing the immortal Dao civilization and hiding it again. To achieve this goal, I returned to the past through the river of time, wanting to solve the problem at the source of this disaster. The Sword Spirit paused slightly. But our understanding of the river of time is too little. The time and space that we finally went to was countless years before the source of the disaster was born. The power of time is indeed mysterious and unfathomable. Sing Hui deeply agreed. The Sword Spirit nodded. At that time, I narrowly escaped death and relied on a great opportunity to jump out of the river of time and return to the past. However, under the influence of the river of time, I also lost a lot of information about myself. When I truly found myself and understood the responsibility I shouldered, I had already wasted tens of thousands of years in the chaos of the void. I didn't have much time left. Fortunately, there's always a way out. In the vast chaos of the void, I met the Prime Clear Saint. The Prime Clear Saint? Sing Hui's heart skipped a beat. He had flipped through the records of that world-shocking battle in the immortal Dao civilization. In those records, the various saints had participated in the battle and died. Only the Prime Clear Saint didn't seem to have appeared. All along, he had thought that it was because the records were too lost, and that the information about the Prime Clear Saint's participation in the battle had been lost. Now, it seemed, that didn't seem to be the case. Chapter 995. Yes, the Shangqing Saint. The Qingping Sword Spirit smiled and said, I didn't expect to meet the Shangqing Saint at that time. Sing Hui looked at the Qingping Sword Spirit. If he did not guess wrongly, the Qingping Sword should be the sword of the Shangqing Saint? Why was he separated from the Shangqing Saint? Due to the battle at the Boundary Tablet Pass, the Shangqing Saint lost all his disciples. However, the Dao Ancestor was unfair and disheartened. After being punished by the Dao Ancestor and sealed in the sky beyond heaven, he simply left the primordial world. When he was wandering in the primordial world, he left the primordial world by chance and entered the chaos void. He lost his way back in the chaos void. If we did not meet by chance later, the Shangqing Saint would have needed many years to return to the primordial world. Naturally, there would not be a series of arrangements. Do you have any arrangements regarding the creation jade? The Qingping Sword Spirit nodded. In fact, when the Shangqing Saint returned to the primordial world and intervened in the battlefield, the defeat of our immortal Dao civilization was already irreversible. The saints had fallen. Even the great Dao ancestor Hong Jun could not reverse the situation. The saints have fallen? Sing Hui frowned. Have they really fallen? Didn't they say that the saints and the immortal Dao world coexist? As long as we can reignite the flames of the immortal Dao civilization, the saints will be able to return from death one day and be reborn. That's true, but the key to how to walk out of death and be reborn lies in the river of time of our immortal Dao civilization. The true meaning of the saints' immortality also comes from the river of time. The river of time is the best and greatest gift that the great eternal plate left for us descendants. The river of time? That's right. The great Dao ancestor controls the eternal power to awaken the fallen saints from the river of time. This is also the reason why even if the saints are not sleeping but have truly fallen, as long as the fire seed of the immortal Tao civilization is not extinguished, the saints of the immortal Tao civilization will return from death one day. Xing Hui was enlightened when he heard that. At this moment, he already understood the greatness of ultimate eternity. As the river of time left behind by the eternal plate, it was not surprising that it had such an ability. Wait, you're saying the Tao ancestor can awaken the fallen saints from the river of time? In other words, the saints are completely immortal and indestructible. If they die, they can just return from the river of time. Then why were they defeated? The Qingping sword spirit glanced at Xing Hui. Shouldn't you understand this point? I understand. The price of manifesting the river of time. The price, Xing Hui immediately understood. Manifesting the river of time required a saint to burn himself. How difficult is it to become a saint? If the immortal Tao civilization was still complete, it would only take a few tens of thousands of years for a fallen saint to regain his sainthood. But without the support of the immortal Tao civilization, it would be extremely difficult for a fallen saint to regain his sainthood. The Qingping sword spirit said. Tens of thousands of years. Xing Hui understood. Under normal circumstances, tens of thousands of years was nothing to the great saints. Perhaps they could rest for hundreds of millions of years. However, during the Great War, countless top experts died at every moment. Even if the time axis of creation and chaos lifeforms was extremely long, tens of thousands of years was still enough for many things to happen. In other words, the speed of the enemy's attack surpassed the speed at which they could revive and recover. Under such circumstances, even with the river of time, the immortal Tao civilization would still be defeated in the end. In addition, to activate the river of time and revive someone from it, there's another prerequisite. It requires the power of the creation jade. The creation jade? The Qingping sword spirit nodded. That's right. Compared to the long river of time, the immortal jade of fate is equal to a key that could bring people out of the long river of time. The one who holds this key is qualified to open the long river of time. Only then could he really revive people out of the long river of time. But later, the creation jade shattered? The Qingping sword spirit said, due to various reasons, the creation jade itself was damaged. Even though it was repaired by Tao ancestor Hongjun, it was not nourished by the power of the immortal Tao civilization, leaving behind hidden dangers. Like broken porcelain, no matter how well it was glued, the cracks could not be truly removed forever. Usually, these cracks did not seem to affect the immortal Tao civilization, but when the creation jade was frequently used, it finally became unable to bear the burden. Moreover, at that time, the Master of Chaos appeared out of nowhere and blocked all of our attacks. The Master of Gods and Master of Time led many creation and chaos lifeforms to attack with full force, tearing apart our immortal Tao civilization. Thus, the creation jade that was equivalent to our immortal Tao civilization's imperial jade seal shattered. It had cracked, the prelude to the immortal Tao civilization's defeat. Then, the creation jade that came after. For our immortal Tao civilization to continue passing on and even reignite one day, we had to ensure three major factors. The first factor was the creation jade. The second factor was at least one saint, and the last factor was that the immortal Tao civilization's flame could not be severed. Otherwise, without the immortal Tao civilization's worship, the creation jade would not be able to repair itself. Under such circumstances, the prime clear saint, who knew that the situation was hopeless, found a piece of creation jade and found a place to create the source world, ensuring that the immortal Tao civilization's flame would not be extinguished. However, one piece of creation jade was clearly not enough. The prime clear saint vainly tried to find Tao ancestor Hongjun and take away all of the creation jade. Unfortunately, by that time, we had already been completely defeated. Even the great Tao ancestor. Hearing this, Xing Hui's doubts were resolved. All along, he had thought that the teleportation formation from the divine wilderness great world to the source world was set up by Tao ancestor Hongjun. But now, it seemed that it was the prime clear saint who had set it up. However, this was not strange. Among the many saints of the immortal Tao civilization, the prime clear saint was the one who had the deepest understanding of formations. The famous immortal extermination sword formation and 10,000 immortals formation were the best examples. The situation back then was really terrible. Unfortunately, I was in the long river of time and could not escape. I was powerless and could only think of ways to send a message to the prime clear saint. In the end, the prime clear saint might or might not have known. Anyway, he used a different method to leave behind the spark of the immortal Tao civilization and planted this spark on the Master of Chaos. He absorbed fuel from the Master of Chaos and turned it into the self-healing energy of the creation divine jade. A different method. Xing Hui looked pensive. You mean the divine beast bloodline cultivation system? The green duckweed sword spirit nodded. Although the Master of Chaos draped a layer of skin over the divine beast bloodline system, it is undeniable that these 12 bloodlines are the continuation of our immortal Tao civilization. It is precisely because of the existence of these 12 bloodlines that the spark of the immortal Tao civilization can continue to burn and give the creation divine jade the ability to self-heal. This is also why the creation divine jade was able to fuse into one immediately after you obtain the creation divine jade fragment. We have the creation divine jade and the immortal Tao saint, and the spark of the immortal Tao civilization has never been extinguished. Although our immortal Tao civilization has experienced a great destruction and almost lost our inheritance, we can still welcome new life after the destruction. There was a faint smile on the green duckweed sword spirit's face. Now, what you need to do is borrow the power of the creation divine jade to revive the fallen saints in the long river of time. Then, take advantage of these million years of peace and develop an even more magnificent immortal Tao civilization on the basis of the Master of Chaos universe. I believe that after obtaining the universe of this great chaos life form, our immortal Tao civilization will definitely have more resources and give birth to more experts. With more experts, the shackles will be unlocked and the saints of our immortal Tao civilization will have hope to take another step forward. Perhaps one day in the future, someone will truly be able to catch up to the great plate of eternity and step into the ultimate eternity that symbolizes eternity. Then what about me? After I revive the saints, how do I leave the long river of time? The fortune jade is the key to everything. What you need to do now is to summon the power of the fortune jade and project it into the river of time. It can resurrect the saints, and it can also take you away from the river of time. However, because your power has been exhausted the moment you manifested the river of time, you will experience a cycle of reincarnation. Moreover, because your information will be washed away by the river of time, this cycle of reincarnation will be incomparably thorough, and no information will be left behind. Ascend to the sainthood again? What if I can't ascend to the sainthood again? The green duckweed sword spirit was taken aback. How is that possible? You have the bearing of a saint, and one who has cultivated to the 5th level of the chaos realm. It's just one cycle of reincarnation and won't affect you much. At least, I remember the few saints who had reincarnated and cultivated anew. Their ascension to the sainthood was smooth and uneventful. Xing Hui thought back to everything that had happened along the way and began to ask himself, could he really ascend to the sainthood without any external help? And the countless copies of himself he had seen in the parallel universes, tens of thousands of copies of himself had collapsed in the saint realm, immortality realm, and even the mortal realm. If he collapsed halfway and was reincarnated again, would he still be himself at that time? Even if he ascended to the sainthood again, all traces and information that belonged to him would have been washed away by the long river of time. Would he still be himself at that time? Everything in the parallel universes was still vivid in his mind. In some parallel universes, he had even personally killed Jiang Ningji by shuaing and the others in order to attain Tao. For a moment, Xing Hui couldn't help but fall silent. I don't want to return in such a way where I lose everything. What should I do? If I don't want to reincarnate, the green duckweed sword spirit's expression was solemn. After a moment, he still looked towards the end of the eternal road. If he didn't want to reincarnate, there was only one way, and that was to attain eternity. Chapter 996. I want to take a look at the end of the eternal road and see the true appearance of eternity. Sing Hui was silent for a long time before he said slowly, "The true appearance of eternity." The green duckweed sword spirit looked at Sing Hui and sighed in her heart. "You might be disappointed if I tell you, but, according to my understanding, whether you can successfully attain eternity and step onto the eternal road can be determined from the side the moment you step into the river of time." Sing Hui thought about the situation of the Master of Chaos, Master of Gods, Master of Time, and the others that the green duckweed sword spirit had mentioned. "You mean, ordinary people can't see the scenes in the river of time?" The green duckweed sword spirit nodded. "Other than yourself, no one can see your other timelines because the moment you attain eternity, you no longer have a past and a future. Countless timelines have been combined into one, and your true self is the only one. Other than you, who can see your own timeline, no other living being can see the mysteries of your timeline. In other words, even if I, a special living being in the river of time, wanted to transmit the other scenes in the river of time, I wouldn't be able to do so. Eternity, determined by heaven? It's not determined by heaven. If you're really eternal, then you'll have attained eternity at a certain moment in the future. Then, there'll naturally be related signs. This sign, no matter what method you use to step into the river of time, will be understood and understood by you." The green duckweed sword spirit paused for a moment. Then she smiled bitterly. "Actually, this is a contradiction. There are two conditions to enter the river of time. One is that the river of time exists in this world, and the other is that the cultivator has the power to break through to the eternal realm. This is because stepping into the river of time requires you to burn everything and give up everything. If you don't have the power to break through to the eternal realm, then stepping into the river of time is akin to suicide. What about the chaos and creation beings? Most of them are only at the 4th or 5th tier of the chaos realm. They're still far from the eternal realm, right? Why would they choose to step into the river of time? Those chaos and creation beings are different from us. The green duckweed sword spirit sighed. Every chaos and creation being is a legend. They've lived for hundreds of millions of years, perhaps even longer than our immortal Tao civilization. Under the erosion of time, they no longer have the will to forge ahead. Life and death no longer have any special meaning to them. Their sole purpose in life is to pursue the ultimate realm, eternity. Just as I've said, whether they've attained eternity or not, the moment they step into the river of time. They step into the river of time. Sing Hui's path to eternity was so cruel. The green duckweed sword spirit nodded. If they're able to break through to the eternal realm in their lifetime, then great perseverance, great wisdom, and great opportunities will follow when they step into the river of time. In short, there will be all sorts of opportunities and coincidences that will allow them to break through to the eternal realm and transform their state of mind, allowing them to step into the eternal realm in one fell swoop. Everything will come naturally, as though the moment they step into the river of time is the moment they step into the river of time. If they're not destined for the eternal realm, then their life's pursuit will be nothing more than an illusion. Under such circumstances, you can imagine the impact they'll suffer. Compared to a hopeless life, death is a form of release for them, which is why they'll step into the river of time without hesitation. The meaning of life. Sing Hui understood. Compared to those chaotic beings and creation beings, the time he had spent as a chaotic being was far too short. It was so short that their understanding of the meaning of life was completely different. Most chaotic beings and creation beings, even if they break through to the eternal realm, will only wander around the edges of the chaotic universe and world that gave birth to them because they haven't seen through the meaning and true meaning of life. They can't give up their emotions as sentient beings, but when you've lived long enough, you'll realize how painful it is to continue living. The corrosion of time is the most merciless. Many powerful chaotic beings and creation beings can't even withstand the corrosion of time and choose to sleep, and it's an eternal sleep. For example, these chaotic beings and creation beings, even if they can't step into the eternal realm and only die, they'll still die at night. I believe that at the moment they die, they'll die with a smile. Tsing Hui sighed in his heart when he heard the green duckweed sword spirit's words. Everyone in the world strives for immortality, but if the poison of time corrodes all your worries as a sentient being, then what is the point of living? After a long period of silence, Ching Su said slowly, "The end of my timeline is when I was surrounded and killed by the Lord of Gods, the Lord of Chaos, the Lord of Time, as well as the various beings of chaos and creation. All of the timelines point to this scene in the end, and yet, my timeline has never converged into one in the river of time. Is eternity destined from this moment? In fact, not a single one of the countless peerless geniuses of the immortal Tao civilization has been able to attain eternity?" The sword spirit nodded. "At least, none of the beings above Golden Immortal of the Great Firmament have been able to attain eternity, Golden Immortal of the Great Firmament. This should have something to do with the Tao Ancestor. The Tao Ancestor used a strange technique to place the true spirit of a Golden Immortal of the Great Firmament in the river of time, allowing it to possess a trace of the mysteries of a chaotic being. This mysteries can allow one to borrow the power of the Great Firmament to breathe in and out chaos energy. Let's not talk about the exact use of this for now, but from then on, their shadows will be left in the river of time. Currently, there hasn't been a single being whose true spirit can't be placed in the river of time. If someone's true spirit can't be placed in the river of time, it means," the sword spirit nodded and said at the same time, "but the possibility is too low. You've already seen the images of the others in your timeline from the river of time, so you should naturally understand that in the vast thousand worlds and parallel universes, there are countless sixth-level chaotic beings similar to the Master of Chaos, the Master of Gods, and the Master of Time. They may have tried time and time again to attain eternity. In total, there are more than 100,000, 1,000,000, or even 10 million times, but without exception, they all ended in failure. Even the brilliant Master of Time, the Master of Gods, and the Master of Chaos ended up like this, let alone a tiny immortal Tao civilization like ours. Every eternity can be called a miracle of the world. A peerless darling who possesses the infinite fortune of the multiverse." Tsing Hui raised his head and looked at the flowing light around him that was constantly flashing and flowing. Every streak of light was a timeline, and every timeline had countless living beings struggling and floating within it, and the fate of every single self in these timelines, they were all exactly the same. Whether or not he could attain eternity was already decided at this moment. Any subsequent efforts would be meaningless. If this was fate, how desperate would any living being who saw fate feel at this moment? Especially those who couldn't see fate, but whose fate had already been decided. How desperate would they feel? Ultimate eternity. This was the end of despair. Tsing Hui lowered his head, completely disheartened. Cultivation? Becoming stronger? Becoming the master of his own life? What was the point of all of this? The moment fate was born, everything had already been decided. Those who could stand at the peak would definitely look down on all living beings from above. As for those who couldn't climb to the peak, no matter how hard they tried and how much they gave up, they could only roll and fall in front of the ultimate path. Fate was like a chasm of despair, destroying everyone's efforts and crushing them into dust and mud. Eternity. Tsing Hui let out a long breath. At this moment, all the strength in his body seemed to have been sucked away. He turned back. Through the timelines, he looked back. If they didn't want to succumb to the hopeless and eternal fate, they would have to fight until their heads bled, just like the Master of Gods, the Master of Time, the Master of Chaos, and the many other creation and chaos life forms. They would have to fight for a single moment of light and die a heroic death. He still looked back without any results. He looked at the worries that he still couldn't completely let go of as a sentient being. He lowered his arrogant head that dared to look directly at the ultimate eternity. He turned his gaze to form a part of his life, to become one of the billions of living beings in the timelines. After a long time, Tsing Hui's heart gradually calmed down. Billions of living beings. It was an adjective that he often used to describe billions of living beings. But in fact, in front of ultimate eternity, who was just one of the billions of living beings. Since he was one of the billions of living beings, he had to live according to the way the billions of living beings lived. Thinking of this, Sing Hui's gaze fell on the River of Time and every scene in the timelines in the River of Time. Many similar and different figures were constantly acting out the struggle of life and survival in the timelines. He looked at it was as if he wanted to remember all these scenes in the bottom of his heart, bury them, and never forget them. Even though he understood, when he used the creation heavenly jade to pull living beings out of the River of Time and resurrect them, in order to get rid of the River of Time, all his memories, life information, and soul information would disappear under the scouring of the River of Time. However, he was still looking hard. Looking at this last scene, visualizing the creation sacred jade and borrowing the power of the creation sacred jade as a to project it into the River of Time, I can see all the living beings who have placed their true spirits in the River of Time and revive them. The green duckweed sword spirit nodded. Sing Hui's gaze fell on the green duckweed sword spirit again. What about you? The green duckweed sword spirit shook her head. Oh no. Maybe I will continue to stay in the River of Time, and continue to stay, until a certain eternity is born to help me escape this fate. Fate? Yes, fate. The green duckweed sword spirit repeated. Yes, fate, Sing Hui muttered and then laughed. The green duckweed sword spirit also smiled faintly. In the next moment, Sing Hui closed his eyes and focused on visualizing. The creation's sacred jade gradually appeared in the River of Time. Chapter 997. Time flowed like water for 100,000 years. Though the Lord of Chaos himself had left, he left behind an immensely vast chaosverse. It was 1,000 times larger than the immortal Dao civilization at its peak, let alone the immortal Dao civilization that was now in tatters. The region where the Lord of Chaos and the immortal Dao civilization overlapped was in fact only a small part of his vast body. Aside from the peak experts in this region, there were countless sovereigns, rulers, and great masters in the Lord of Chaos universe. Some of the greatest masters were a cut above the likes of the Grand Creation Holy Sovereign and the Black and White Reverends. In terms of combat strength, they were at least on par with the Tenvain level. Under such circumstances, even though the Lord of Chaos, the Lord of Time, the Lord of Gods, and the many creation and chaos beings that had once surrounded the immortal Dao civilization had left for 100,000 years, the immortal Dao civilization that only had vast ocean and plentiful treasures overseeing it could only survive between the cracks. Without the Lord of Chaos, the Lord of Gods, and the Lord of Time to restrain them, many peak masters emerged to wage war and slaughter everywhere. The Lord of Chaos Chaosverse and the immortal Dao civilization's Chaosverse were thrown into chaos, with countless battles of all sorts taking place in every corner of the domain. Until one day, a voice abruptly rang out in both the Lord of Chaos Chaosverse and the immortal Dao civilization's domain. Above the 9 layers of clouds, I comprehend the truth of the Dao on a praying mat. Beyond heaven and earth, I am the hierarch. Pangu gave birth to the Taiji, the yin and yang of the 4 divisions. The Dao is passed down to the 3 friends, the Chan and Jie sects are divided, and the Taoist sect leads the way. As the voice spread out, it seemed to resonate with the world. For a moment, streaks of golden light rose from a certain place in the immortal Dao civilization, illuminating 10 trillion light years. Under the influence of this voice, all living beings within range felt as if they were listening to holy music. All of them abruptly stopped fighting and looked in the direction of the voice with respect or shock. Compared to the living beings of the chaotic universe, the Lord of Time, and the Lord of Gods who didn't know what was going on, the many virtual immortals, true immortals, immortal lords, immortal emperors, and heavenly lords in the immortal Dao civilization were stunned when they heard the voice. Then their emotions surged. Some ancient immortals who had survived the great calamity couldn't help but cry tears of joy. They bowed in the direction of the voice and the golden light, calling them Dao Ancestor. The Heavenly Lord of Myriad Treasures, the Heavenly Lord of Vast Seas, the Heavenly Lord of Purple Gold, and the other experts also rushed toward the source of the golden light and the sound at their fastest speed. At this moment, the immortal Tao civilization seemed to have been reborn. As Tao ancestor Hongjun regained his sainthood, the structure of the world immediately changed. No matter how many almighty experts there were in the chaotic universe left behind by the Lord of Chaos, how could they possibly contend against a saint? Under Tao ancestor Hongjuan's influence, the broken immortal Tao civilization directly infiltrated the Lord of Chaos universe, which only had its instinctive consciousness left. An unprecedented scene of a snake devouring an elephant played out. The Lord of Chaos universe, which only had its instinctive consciousness left, was defeated by Tao ancestor Hongjuan's invasion. Not only did the immensely huge chaotic universe fall into the hands of the immortal Tao civilization, but Tao ancestor Hongjun also used the laws cultivated by the 12 divine beasts as an entry point to infiltrate the Lord of Chaos universe, reversing the laws of the entire chaotic universe. Although only the Lord of Chaos universe was left behind for Tao ancestor Hongjun to use, the Lord of Gods, the Lord of Time, and the other creation and chaos beings had all entered the River of Time. The River of Time was the foundation of the immortal Tao civilization, and the power it emitted transformed into laws, causing the immortal Tao civilization's laws to recover at an extremely fast pace and become even stronger than before. Taking advantage of this advantage, Tao ancestor Hongjun first used the laws of the 12 divine beasts to penetrate the Lord of Chaos universe. Then he transformed the laws of the 12 divine beasts into pure cultivation laws of the immortal Tao civilization, causing the entire chaotic universe to shake violently. The revival of the immortal Tao and the acquisition of all the wealth left behind by the Lord of Chaos caused the entire immortal Tao civilization to experience explosive development. Countless cultivators of the immortal Tao civilization who had been stuck at the false immortal, true immortal, high immortal, immortal emperor, and even the heavenly monarch realm all broke through. False immortals broke through to true immortals broke through to immortal monarchs broke through to immortal emperors, and immortal emperors broke through to heavenly monarchs. The original heavenly monarchs grew even stronger and entered the ranks of the strongest. Killing ordinary great masters of combat arts was as easy as pie. Compared to the revival of the immortal Tao civilization, the peak experts born in the Lord of Chaos universe all suffered a drastic drop in cultivation due to the changes in laws. Even the strongest of the great masters of combat arts suffered a drastic drop in combat strength, becoming the weakest and most ordinary great masters of combat arts. Some of the weaker great masters of combat arts even fell from the throne of great masters of combat arts and became sovereigns. They were no longer sovereigns, but immortal emperors. The immortal Tao civilization's infiltration of the laws of the Lord of Chaos universe had fundamentally changed the very nature of the Lord of Chaos universe, causing the cultivation system of the Lord of Chaos to change. This was equivalent to one civilization's system invading and assimilating another civilization's system. In the end, only the strong survived. As time passed, the cultivation system of the immortal Tao civilization that rose once more would completely replace the cultivation system left behind by the Lord of Chaos, the Lord of Time, and the Lord of Gods. Those three great existences would then be squeezed into a corner just like before, with only the two heavenly lords, vast sea and plentiful treasures, barely surviving. In fact, the Lord of Time, Lord of Gods, and Lord of Chaos had considered that the immortal Tao civilization contained the mysteries of eternity, so they hadn't truly wiped out the immortal Tao civilization's legacy. They didn't want the mysteries of eternity to disappear with the destruction of the immortal Tao civilization. However, the immortal Tao civilization didn't care about the civilizations left behind by the three great masters. As the immortal Tao civilization's advantage grew, the cultivation system left behind by the Lord of Gods, Lord of Time, and Lord of Chaos would eventually be submerged in the River of Time. It was possible that even a great master of combat arts, or even an immortal emperor, would cease to exist. The immortal Tao flourished. With the emergence of Tao ancestor Hongjun, the immortal Tao civilization naturally welcomed unprecedented opportunities for development. In order to obtain greater power, countless cultivators who'd originally belonged to the Lord of Chaos abandoned their cultivation system that was destined to have little future prospects and joined the sects created by the immortal Tao civilization's top powerhouses. Lord of Violet Gold, Lord of Void, Lord of Dominating Dragon, Lord of Flashover, Lord of Cloud Orchid, the sects established by the various heavenly lords welcomed unprecedented opportunities for development. This was especially true for Lord of Vast Sea and Lord of Many Treasures, whose sects were hailed as the number 1 and number 2 sects in the world. In order to spread the immortal Tao civilization as quickly as possible and allow Tao ancestor Hongjun to devour the chaos verse left behind by the Lord of Chaos more quickly and transform it into the foundation of the immortal Tao civilization, many immortal sects opened their doors wide and continuously recruited cultivators and living beings from the Lord of Chaos universe. True immortals, immortal lords, and immortal emperors opened their sects at every moment, attracting countless people to join them. Every few thousand years, more and more powerful organizations would rise to prominence, taking the place of the Chaosverse's native forces and expanding the influence of the immortal Tao civilization. The immortal Tao civilization's development was in full swing, ushering in an unprecedented golden age. With the opening of many sects, the Eastern Sun Sword sect, which had a heavenly lord overseeing it, naturally attracted countless people. The heavenly lords of the Eastern Sun Sword sect were still inexperienced compared to those who'd broken through to become heavenly lords of old. The sect's foundation was also far from comparable to those who'd broken through to become heavenly lords. However, a heavenly lord was still a heavenly lord. Countless geniuses were attracted every time the sect opened its doors and left behind many fascinating legends in the sect competition. Today, however, it was time for the Eastern Sun Sword sect to open its doors again. At this moment, a young man was walking along the mountain path of the Eastern Sun Sword sect with a sword in hand, accompanied by a servant. He traveled against the wind and arrived at the sect's square. This young man was born in the Lu family, a great immortal cultivation clan. His ancestor had once been a great medium. However, due to the decline of the cultivation system of the Master of Chaos, that great medium had no choice but to change his path and cultivate the immortal Tao. Relying on the foundation that he had accumulated in the past, he now had the cultivation of an immortal emperor and could be considered a tyrant. However, despite his immortal emperor cultivation, the cultivation world had a very important disadvantage compared to the cultivation system of other worlds: sectarian bias. When the immortal Tao civilization had promoted the immortal Tao cultivation system, all kinds of cultivation methods had been spread everywhere. However, now that the immortal Tao civilization had become the mainstream of the world, the top cultivation methods were gradually withdrawn by the heavenly lords and kept as secrets. In addition, the immortal lords, immortal emperors, and heavenly lords not only had cultivation, but also divine abilities and dharma treasures. These secret methods were all in the hands of the top immortal Tao factions. Without powerful divine abilities and top-notch dharma treasures, even an immortal emperor might be killed by a true immortal lord with a connate spiritual treasure. Under such circumstances, although the Lu family had an immortal emperor, there were also many immortal lords. In order to obtain top-notch divine abilities and connate spiritual treasures, they still allowed their disciples to join the major cultivation sections. The young man in front of him was the most outstanding genius of the Lu family's younger generation. He was extremely talented and had cultivated for less than 100 years, but he had already become an immortal lord. He was extremely ambitious and had given himself the name Suppress, which meant that he could suppress all the geniuses in the world. With such talent, he naturally didn't have to worry about not being able to join any of the heavenly lords. Instead, he had to choose which sect to join. This time, he had been away for 100 years and visited 4 of the top sects with heavenly lords. He had secretly observed them, but none of them were worthy of his attention. The Eastern Sun Sword sect before him was the 5th. Young master, I've already learned about the Eastern Sun Sword sect in detail. Although they have a heavenly lord, she just became a heavenly lord 10,000 years ago. It said that she was only an immortal lord 100,000 years ago. Compared to the 4 great sects and 4 great heavenly lords we went to before, they're inferior. I don't think we should waste too much time in this sect. The old man who looked like a servant beside the young man said in a low voice. Although he was dressed as a servant, he was a true immortal lord. His cultivation was not inferior to many of the outer sect elders of the Eastern Sun Sword sect. Since we're here, we should take a look. The heavenly lord of the Eastern Sun Sword sect was able to break through 2 levels in 100,000 years. Maybe there's something special about her. The young man said seriously. Well then. Although the Lord of Heaven of the Eastern Sun Sword sect can't compare to those veteran experts, the sect has a tradition. Every time the sect opens its doors, the sect master who has cultivated to the Lord of Heaven will personally appear and pass down a set of swordsmanship to the world. Although this set of swordsmanship may not be very brilliant, it's probably not too bad since it's taught by a Lord of Heaven. This is also the reason why so many people come to the Eastern Sun Sword sect every time the sect opens its doors. It's one thing to be a disciple, but the main thing is to learn a move or two from the Lord of Heaven. A heavenly lord performing a sword technique? The young man couldn't help but be curious. A heavenly lord was a figure who stood at the peak of the cultivation world. Now, he was willing to show up in front of the world and teach them a sword technique? This was very rare. Dong. 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 As the sound spread throughout the world, the disciple selection of the Eastern Sun Sword sect finally began. However, the young man didn't sign up. Instead, he watched from below the stage. With his current level of cultivation, it would be bullying if he fought with those disciples who were at most at the void immortal realm in the arenas that had been cultivated for less than 300 years. Even if he fought with someone who had cultivated for more than 1,000 years, no one would be able to defeat him. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't get a profound cultivation art, he wouldn't even want to join the sect. With his talent, he would definitely be able to enter the Heavenly Lord realm in 1,000 years or even 10,000 years. Why would he want to be a disciple of someone else? The disciples of the Eastern Sun Sword sect were fighting in an orderly manner. After 10 days, 300 disciples finally stood out and were qualified to enter the Eastern Sun Sword sect. As the disciple selection came to an end, many cultivators who knew the rules of the Eastern Sun Sword sect immediately became excited. The Heavenly Lord performing a sword technique would take place after the disciple selection. He's coming, he's coming! Along with a burst of excited shouts, the crowd immediately became excited. In the forbidden area of the back mountain of the Eastern Sun Sword sect, a bright light suddenly shone and a beautiful figure walked out of the light. Heavenly Lord Jiang is here. Greetings, Heavenly Lord Jiang. Thank you, Heavenly Lord Jiang, for performing a sword technique for us. All kinds of shouts came from the crowd, and many people even bowed respectfully to the beautiful figure in the void. However, the figure didn't answer. She just rode the wind and started to perform a sword technique. The technique? It looked like a mortal technique, but it contained the essence of the sword Tao and was full of unparalleled mysteries. For a moment, everyone fell silent. Among these people, including the young man from the Liu family, he looked at Heavenly Lord Jiang performing a sword technique in front of him, and his mind went blank. At this moment, there was a gentle breeze, and there was a blue sky and white clouds. Countless magnificent buildings rose from the ground in the Eastern Sun Sword sect, and there were also green trees everywhere, but in front of him, at this moment, only the figure performing a sword technique in the void was left, her unadorned face, her exquisite dancing figure, and her elegant and ethereal temperament. This scene was suddenly imprinted in his mind. It seemed like a long time, but it also seemed like only a moment. At this moment, time was like an ink brush that drew an ink painting, rolled up by someone, and cast into eternity. There's no need to ruin everyone's reading experience for the goal of 1,000 chapters. Let's stop here for this book. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.